rapping, probably inappropriate raps.
I was just dropping
for a
some
pot
science. I was sharing the
That's
skinny.
science.
of
What's
the
up, Pod TVers out there? I can see all y'all
411.
in the chat. Let me just get a microphone window up here. Yes, our mics are looking and sounding good. They look good.
What up, flower children? This
David
is
Malmo Levine with me. If David's eating the microphone, let us know in the chat.
Jazza DML in his house.
Let me just quickly test. We're doing, I had to bring DML here today because it's a Think of the Children show.
Won't
And David, as
somebody
always,
think of the children? I'm always thinking of the children. I tell you, their best interests.
Of course.
What do you think?
Well, I
You
mean,
got a
their
pervert.
parents have a lot of cash, so, you know. David's selling books.
I'm selling
Kids
books.
love books.
Because one thing that kids love almost as much as marijuana is reading books about marijuana. And we have a doozy.
Just about.
We have a doozy for you, folks. If you want to learn about cannabis in teens and how cannabis affects or doesn't affect the developing minds of young people, then I highly recommend my book, Does Cannabis Harm the Developing Minds, Inherently Harm the Developing Minds of Young People? And this
Can
book,
you say it 3 times fast?
Does Cannabis Inherently Harm the Developing Minds of Young People? Does Cannabis Inherently Harm the Developing Minds of Young People? Does Cannabis Inherently Harm the Developing Minds of Young People? Now, if you read this book, you'll find that the answer is no, cannabis does not harm the developing minds of young people. And the short answer is that the increases in schizophrenia or decreases in IQ just don't appear in the general population statistics in Western society. That's a nutshell.
Yes, that was quite a nutshell.
Yeah. If you want, that's the wisdom that the book contains. But it's more than that. It's also a history of using parental hysteria as a way to attack scapegoats and drive the populations to extreme punishments towards Jews, witches, Socrates, people like that, people who really don't have any victim impact statements in their trials.
I like how in the book you do 2 things. You, of course, first analyze all of the studies you could find about children and marijuana use, and really look at them, and you put them up against the criteria that all studies should have to follow in order to be scientific and to have worth. Unfortunately, those studies on kids and marijuana do not meet that criteria. They do not match up to the actual points they have to in order to be scientific.
There were only 2 studies that argued there was a causal relationship between cannabis use and pathology in young people. One argued schizophrenia, the other one argued IQ loss, and neither of them could really look at 7 elements of cannabis use. The first one was the difference between proper use and abuse. The second one was looking for the causal relationship. Mm-hmm. Another one was whether the beneficial uses were looked at and weighed against the possible risks. Another one was the problems that come with prohibition and whether they outweigh the problems that come with proper cannabis use and figuring that out. Another one was looking at whether the studies would contradict each other or even mention each other, because there were studies that disagreed with each other. Right. And there was really little debate. There's a little bit of debate about the IQ and the schizophrenia, but no debate on proper use, no debate on beneficial use, no debate on medical autonomy, which is another thing. None of the 24 studies I looked at mentioned medical autonomy, and they all should, because we're not livestock, that being the farmers figuring out what medicine to give to sheep. We're human beings, and we get to decide our diet and our medicine. This goes back to the Nuremberg doctor trials and the concept of human medical autonomy really originated after World War II, and people said, well, we shouldn't treat people like they were lab animals. We should allow them to make their medical choices. You see that also evolving into things like a living will, informed consent for experiments, vaccinations, things like that. That's another big thing, is autonomy is being attacked through mandatory vaccinations. And I think people should have the right to decide yes or no, whether they want to be filled up with really nasty things that have a horrible safety record and really no monitoring to speak of.
I'm trying to find the cover of your book to show people. I have this picture of
Oh,
it.
well, you can go to stressedanddepressed.ca.
Okay.
And you can actually read the book online, and you can order from that website as well, stressedanddepressed.ca. And if you go to booklets, it'll have information on reading the book, PDF, HTML formats, and hardcover or softcover.
Originally published on Cannabis Culture.
Originally published on Cannabis Culture. We mentioned that in the book.
Where do we find it?
Okay, so you go to the hamburger.
I love that.
Drop-down menu, and you go to booklets and pamphlets and articles.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, and then
so you folks can see what it looks like out there.
right. So if you go scroll down, there it is. Bam.
There it is.
Yeah. So that's the link to reading it.
Oh, but it doesn't have the picture of the. It doesn't.
Oh, if you scroll down further.
Oh, okay.
No. I mean on the back. Go back one.
Go back.
Okay. Now scroll down further. There. Bam. Look at that.
There we go. Now I can show it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Copy paste.
Good cover. I like
Good
the
cover.
What is the cover from?
The cover is from a movie poster of one of the Reefer Madness movies that came out, and it was your typical, cannabis leads to all the woes that young people experience: sin, degradation, vice, and insanity.
And this beautiful young lady is hanging out with the devil.
Yes, your young blonde teenage daughter is smoking up with Satan.
He looks like he might be of African descent.
He is
instead of being the devil.
He is a green devil, but he has non-Caucasian features that it's definitely
drug war racism.
He's not a good white man anyway. He's kind of a green horned beast. But yes, the green devil is smoking with your daughter right now. She's getting high with Satan's, the source of food, medicine, and clothing that grows in the devil's garden. And she's obviously going to have promiscuous sex and catch syphilis, like Hitler argued the Jews were doing to the European teens, the good Aryan teens of Europe.
Mm-hmm, right.
In Mein Kampf. So this
biological warfare.
Yeah, well, this whole thing is like, if you want to destroy a scapegoat, they can't just be, taking up parking spaces or ripping the tags off mattresses. They really have to be threatening that which you hold dear.
Women and children.
Your women and children, exactly. So if that's happening, and there's no evidence of actual women and children being harmed, then it's the oldest trick in the scapegoater's book. So yeah, we do a whole history of that. We look at the Jews, we look at the witches, and we look at Socrates, who also went to court, and this is strange. He said, hey, all the people in court in the audience here are my supporters. There are none of these victims of which you speak. And when I was sitting in Don Briere's trial, they said, is there a victim impact statement? I said, no, there's no victim impact statement. And I'm like, of course there's no victim impact statement, because there's no victims. That's why you never get one in any court. In all over the world, there's probably a pot trial happening 200 times a day in North America and more in other places. And they never trot out all those insane and stupid kids or insane and stupid adults that have suffered from the use of cannabis.
After looking at the science, I mean, you've looked at the science of how marijuana affects kids, but I think it really is similar to the way that marijuana affects adults.
That's right. They use it as an antidepressant and a relaxant, a euphoric and an epiphanic, and they use it the way we use it.
Epiphanic.
I know it was a long time ago. I got a lot of gray hairs, but I remember what it was like being a teenager. I did not like school. I thought I was being institutionalized for a crime I didn't commit. I didn't like really my home life either. I thought I was too much under the thumb of arbitrary forces. And I got suicidal at times because I got that whole angst about realizing that life is a series of painful moments followed by a death that lasts forever. And I wondered how I was going to make it through the next day. And suddenly, when I was 14 and my hormones were making me bounce off the walls like a crazy person, like a chainsaw on fire and a danger to me and everyone around me, I discovered cannabis. And it was a relaxant when I needed a relaxant. It was an antidepressant when I needed an antidepressant. And quite frankly, it made a minute feel like an hour during the greatest moments of my life, my youth, my health. When I was getting my pee-pee wet.
That's why it was a minute.
In the fountain of youth. Yeah, that's why a minute feeling like an hour is really handy sometimes. So, why take that?
All you got is a minute.
When all you got is a minute. Hey, baby, this will feel like an hour. Guaranteed. Try this marijuana. It's magical. So this is why I defend cannabis use in teens, because A, you'll never stop it, because cannabis is great and teens know it, and it's not dangerous, and teens know that too. You'll never stop it. You might as well make it safe. Bring it off the black market. Don't go a guy like Guido selling pot to your girl, your daughter, your wife, your sister on the street corner. Have it in a store where Guido is accountable for what he sells. And
I was going to ask you about some of the things, because we talked about the schizophrenia stuff. That's one that they say early onset of schizophrenia might be enhanced, or, basically that your kids might get schizophrenia by smoking pot. I think a lot of people, including Dr. Grinspoon.
They said it could trigger something that already exists.
Right.
And some people spun that as a bad thing. And I spun it as it's a diagnostic tool. Suddenly we have an ability to test people for schizophrenia where we can decide when they're going to react or not to the pot. Right. And there is actual therapy that I cited in my article where finding out that you have schizophrenia and then treating it early allows for better outcomes than not. So the sooner you know you have it, the sooner you can deal with it.
That's an interesting idea, and the other thing is, how do you test if a person, like if they didn't smoke the marijuana, how would we know if they were going to get it or not? There's not really a way to do some of the scientific testing on these things.
There's no herbal diagnostic tool for schizophrenia that I know of, and this is just another tool in the tool chest. Why are we looking at this as a bad thing? If it doesn't result in the rates of schizophrenia being increased, then it's simply another tool if we choose to look at it as a tool.
And David, what about the other criticism you hear about smoking marijuana is that it causes some sort of bronchial problems, bronchitis. That's the other one they always drag up.
It does cause bronchitis if you're smoking hemp, like low potency rope, or if it's really chemi swag, you're going to have some lung damage. Who knows how bad it could be? So far, there's been no cases of marijuana-only smokers going on to get lung cancer. But I'm sure if you smoke chemi pot all day long, that's not good for you, and that's why I support organic standards. But if you smoke high-potency cannabis through a water filter, water pipe to cool the smoke to room temperature during high-pleasure, low-pressure activity, there's no evidence of any damage to anybody whatsoever, as long as you do it properly. And I just outlined how.
So, and there are studies that show, of course, the major study that they did when they were looking for cancer actually showed that the marijuana use might have the opposite effect. It might actually slow the cancer.
Or prevent it. Yeah, there's actually more than one place they looked at in the. It was either the Costa Rican studies or the Greece studies. They found it had a prophylactic or protective effect, and the people who smoked cannabis and tobacco had lower cancer rates than the people who smoked tobacco and no cannabis. And actually, people who smoke cannabis have cleaner lungs than people who smoke nothing when they live in the city, because people who smoke nothing and live in the city have no expectorant or lung cleaner they use to clean their lungs out. So that soot from just car exhaust gets in your lungs and stays there. Whereas with cannabis, these particles act as little brooms and they sweep out all the things. And that's why people who smoke cannabis all their lives still have pink lungs. And all the darkness is pushed to the outer edges, but there's no brown lung syndrome, there's no emphysema, there's no cancer caused by marijuana on record.
And if you're a smoker, you know that if you switch to marijuana or you start smoking, you start hacking up all that shit.
Yeah.
It gets it all out of you.
Yeah. Well, when I breathe in too much exhaust because I've been working on a busy street like Hastings or like 41st where the stressed and depressed is, I find I'm coughing up more stuff, and smoking more pot helps me deal with that and get it out of there.
David, I wanted to play this video for people. The reason that I had the idea today to talk about this issue again is because in Alberta, we have a court case that was going on. Now, it just got dropped today by the government of Alberta. This was the government going after a mother and her 4-year-old who she was treating with cannabis. They wanted to stop her. It was effective for her seizures. Now, the cannabis had been shown to stop her seizures for epilepsy, and the government was actually going to basically have an order to stop them, force them, and take the kid away if they didn't. So this went to court today. I have a video from CBC about what happened. So there was some good news. I'm going to play that now for y'all, and we'll come back and talk some more.
The CBC's Charles Rusnaus broke this story and was at the court today, and he joins me now live from Edmonton. So Charles, tell us more about what happened today.
Well, before court started, we saw a lawyer for the government ask the lawyer for the mother to come into a side room. They had a brief chat in there. Then they came out, went into the courtroom, and as soon as it was their turn to speak, the lawyer for the government of Alberta got up and said that they were withdrawing the application for the order that they were seeking in order to stop this mother from providing her daughter with this marijuana-based treatment. And also, the order also sought to force the mother to have her daughter continue on prescription medications that the mother had said didn't work, and instead turned her daughter into a zombie after the court had to accept the situation that was presented by the government. They came outside, and there was a bunch of supporters there from the medicinal marijuana community. They all cheered. And the mother told us that she was thrilled that the government had backed down on her challenge of her right to how she treated her daughter for severe epileptic seizures.
And so, Charles, why did the province put the family through this? Why did they take her to court in the first place?
All we know is from what we see in the application, and what they said is that what she was giving to the child, which is something called cannabidiol, which is it's a derivative of marijuana that does not contain any THC, so has no psychological effect on the child. What they said is that it is an unproven treatment and that it was placing the child's health at risk. Now, this is despite the fact that in Alberta it is legal to dispense this particular treatment, and she had been giving it to her daughter for some time, for a few weeks, with great results. The seizures lessened and stopped, so she's very happy with the ruling and wants to continue with the treatment.
So, you know what is proven?
Microphone.
You know what's proven? What's proven is there's been no deaths related to cannabis, so the safety level is higher than any other anti-epileptic medicine you care to name.
Exactly.
So,
and like you said,
how dare they? How
federal program?
How dare this
legal.
Is working? It's working out for the kid. Can't you just stop the witch hunt? Like for the 4-year-old suffering from seizures that might die if they deny cannabis. Holy, how low do you have to sink?
Doesn't it seem like they pick on the weakest? You know, they go after the sick people. They go after people who are going to have a hard time either protecting themselves in some way or going to court doing it.
When I hear
money.
stories like this, I don't picture a well-meaning bureaucrat who just hasn't educated himself. I picture more like that guy in Pink Floyd's The Wall. Are there any queers in the theater tonight? Get him up against the wall.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's something wrong with these people, but I think it's just more of the same from, who knows who it is in Alberta who's making these decisions, but Alberta's full of the type of people who are voting for Stephen Harper. You know, their government has had issues. They've had a very conservative government in the past. Now it's an NDP government, so things are changing, but
I've got another word. It's a double word day today.
You've been having a lot of that epiphanic.
I've been smoking the epiphanic. Listen, you ready for this? They're hateaholics.
Hateaholics.
They're hateaholics. They're addicted to their own superiority.
Yeah.
The smell of their
Freudaholics.
The smell of their own farts, man. They think the sun shines out of their belly button, and everybody else who doesn't resemble them, smoke and drink what they smoke and drink, are evil people to be hated.
Yep.
Hate the different.
What's going on outside of the window, boys? Is there something hilarious going on out there, or what?
Is someone
people screaming?
Screaming at the brainworms.
Yeah,
I hate it when that happens.
So I think I should play this little Sanjay Gupta clip. Now, this is something that has been out for a while, but I love playing this. I've played it once before on the show.
Is that the one where they do the animated thing with?
Yes.
I love that animated thing.
This is the animated
That's
one.
a really well done thing.
Let me just...
And then can we play White Crimes for the people? Because
Little
Dicky is blowing up, man. He's the next big thing.
Lil Dicky's the next big thing?
Little Dicky is the next big thing. Little Dicky is going to be huge one day. Let me tell you, if he's getting bigger every day. And Little Dicky provides lots of good marijuana content.
Is his song marijuana related?
Oh, yeah. Well, this song is called White Crime.
Yes.
Do you think he would exclude pot from the list of crimes that white people commit
That's
on a
true.
daily basis?
Well, we'll entertain ourselves with that, but we should watch.
Okay, let's watch the Gupta
first. This is
Sanjay, I'm sorry I lied about weed Gupta.
Yes, and he's definitely made up for it with all his apologizing and awesome
and
episodes of the
awesomeness.
show.
He's teaching American public the entourage effect. Go Sanjay, go Sanjay, go Sanjay.
We're back with SGMD. You know, it used to be a fringe issue, but as we head into an election season, Congress is looking at proposals to loosen the federal laws against medical marijuana. Now, one new bill would legalize a treatment that I've been reporting on quite a bit. It's cannabis oil to treat seizures. I want to give you an example of the complex chemistry that's inside this plant. Let's talk about marijuana and your brain. It's a rather complicated process, so let's start off with what's familiar to you. THC. THC is the chemical in weed that gets you high. You feel lightheaded, feel giddy, sometimes relaxed. Marijuana, you can smoke it, you can eat it in an extract of food, you can inhale it with a vapor pen, or consume it in an oil form. It's especially good for little kids who are taking it as a medicine. No matter the method, THC goes through your bloodstream and into your brain. And there, the THC is going to latch onto these special receptors. When they are stimulated, you release dopamine. It sends signals to various nerve cells all around your body and makes the user feel high. Not all cannabis is going to get you stoned. That's because marijuana contains another chemical known as CBD. That's cannabidiol. Marijuana plants that have low THC and high CBD can work really well as a medicine. They can treat things like epilepsy. It works because the CBD chemical can quiet excessive electrical and chemical activity in the brain. I know this 3-year-old girl who went from having 300 seizures a week to 2 per month after her parents gave her cannabis with high levels of CBD. When it comes to marijuana, there's some 500 different chemical compounds. All these compounds work together. It's something known as the entourage effect. It's important because you can't just take a chemical out of marijuana and make a medicine. You need the whole plant, especially when it comes to using pot instead of pills. And joining me now from Washington is Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, who introduced what he calls the Charlotte's Web Medical Hemp Act. It would take some of these...
Okay, Gupta. So that was his little, you stop, Gupta. That was his clip. I love that animation, and it actually shows, it has a, here, we'll cut in a little closer. That's the full shot. We're doing a little mini show today. I didn't set up the whole big stage and everything because Johnny B wasn't here, didn't have an extra guest besides DML, and Neil's down here, though. We want to talk to him, too. Hash smoking now.
Rub smoking. Aye. There's the rub.
Their fingers on fire line.
Yeah.
Pull that out.
All right, do it. Take it all. Take it. Oh, Daddy's impressed. You did that real nice. Yeah.
Oh, baby. What?
You want to hit off?
That's the rub? No. David's good rub. Stimulating rub.
If you haven't had
man.
Rub by David.
Everybody wants a rub by David.
Bring your shoulders to the BCMB.
Whew. Good Lord Almighty. That is good stuff.
Lord
Let's take a look on the hash cam right now. Hash cam.
See, there's a lot of quality control. Involved in being a dispensary owner. We're just going to have to smoke all of this hash and see if we can stand up. And if we can't stand up, Jer, we should add a little warning sticker to the hash.
Right.
Don't smoke more than 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strains at a time, or it may impair.
actually thought this would be a funny thing to do, and I plan on doing this at some point, but imagine if, I'm not sure if anybody's done it yet. You know how cigarette packages have the warning labels on them for smoking. Well, what would those warning labels actually look like for marijuana? You know, they wouldn't really be, you wouldn't have the, like, you know, mangled teeth and all the horrible things, the, like, emphysema lung. Exactly, you'd have funny pictures of people smoking pot, or, eating food too much, or, like, you know, having too much fun in some way. I don't know. We'd have to come up with some ideas, but I think that'd be funny.
The Seattle Police Department came up with their own warning stickers.
Oh,
they put on the Doritos.
They put on Doritos, yeah. I got a pack of those Doritos, actually, from the Seattle cops that year. Yeah, good rub, huh, David? David can't handle his own rub. Yeah.
Mama Levine can't handle the smoke. It was a big hit. That was the biggest hit I did in 10 years. Let's put it that way.
Wow. You've been smoking a lot more lately, David.
Yeah,
What's
I've
going
been
on
feeling
with that?
better. Cut sugar out of my diet and some other things. I feel a lot healthier now.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you look good.
I lost 30 pounds,
You
too.
look like you lost about 30 pounds with the haircut you got.
I lost 30 pounds, and boy, is my supplier pissed. Thanks, Watermelon, for that joke. I keep using
pretty
it.
funny. Hey, speaking of Watermelon.
Watermelon.
She has retired from the beach.
No.
Watermelon is now retired
She's
from the beach.
hung up the titties?
She hung up the watermelons.
Oh, my God.
Her melons. Yeah.
She was
I talked to her on the beach
an
the other
icon.
day, and she was her last day there.
What?
She said she's I'm going to have her on the show, but she said she's decided after all this time to stop. She was doing two things down there: slanging watermelon and slanging weed, wasn't she?
Have her sales been sagging?
No, I think it's just a bare, flat rate that other people are charging, so it might be running her out of business.
Oh my God. So
it's just a naked.
The dispensaries are
naked competition.
Outselling. It's the naked aggression of the open free market. Are you saying that so many dispensaries have cookies for sale that people just?
I think I'd have to ask Watermelon the reasons why she's really doing
competition.
She told me something else that I don't know if I'm even allowed to mention it, so I probably won't. But there could be some cool stuff in her future happening.
Oh, good. So she's not out of the movement.
She has a show called Baking a Fool of Myself.
Oh yeah,
right on Pod TV and other places. It's on the internet.
Yeah, and she's got big moves, big things happening.
I think she's working some deals. So
as long as she's still in the movement, I don't care what she does. She's awesome.
She'll never quit being an activist.
Mad props to the Watermelon.
Yeah, and that was really nice hash. I am now baked. I haven't been smoking a lot today. I ran out of herbs, so
it's still
this
going.
Was my first bong.
There's more,
of the day, David.
If you want more,
it is smoking. I do want more.
You want more? Okay, here. Let me facilitate
we'll talk
that.
more about the kids.
Is there a way to put a mic inside a bong and get the bong mic?
Well, you can put it up to it.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I would advise putting it in the water, though.
No, that is just silly. That's a Darwin Award. There. Getting a little audio off that. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Here it comes. Do it. Take it all. Daddy's proud. There you go, folks. And that's how to take a big one. Take one for the team. Now you're bleeding from the spleen.
Oh, my God.
I like big bongs, and I cannot lie.
So who printed your book, David?
Digitech, on Pender.
They are for sale on your website.
They are for sale on the website. Come in person and buy one at the stressedanddepressed.ca. You can get them online and at the Stressed and Depressed Association Dispensary at 1353 East 41st in Vancouver. Knight and 41st, just behind the Duffins Donuts, the 24-hour donut delicatessen. All your munchie needs are just a stoner's throw away.
So, as part of... Jesus, I can't even talk still.
Keep breathing.
Jesus Christ.
It's important to breathe.
We're having this discussion about the kids. You have a dispensary here in the city of Vancouver. As part of the new dispensary rules that the city is enforcing, you're not actually allowed to help the kids, David.
Oh, well. I'm going to get my license. I'm going to jump through all their hoops. And then if there's one that I personally would challenge first, or encourage others to challenge, who have a war chest. I don't know. If a kid was going to die if I didn't sell him weed, I'd get busted for that. Mm-hmm. If it was a death versus another arrest how many arrests? I've lost count of my arrests. But I'd add that to it, sure. Yeah, I'd save a kid's life. I'd risk arrest to save a kid's life. And I'd be ashamed, really, to know anyone who wouldn't. If any of my friends out there wouldn't risk an arrest to save a kid's life, unfriend me now, And even if you're not a Facebook friend, if you're a real friend, just in face-to-face friend, unfriend me now too, because I don't want to see you. How dare you? An arrest is like you get handcuffs, you get inconvenienced maybe for a day. If you get busted on Friday, I very much doubt they'd make you sit over the weekend for trying to save a kid's life. I think they'd bust you if they bust you during the week. That's not a weekend kind of violation. But anyway, yeah, how dare they? If you get in the way of someone saving a kid's life, then you really ought to be ashamed of yourself. And that's what happened in that clip, right, of that kid on the CBC clip. Jer, the CBC clip.
Yes.
That's what happened, is they were getting...
Sorry, I'm getting the new video up here.
That was a kid suffering from epilepsy, 4-year-old.
Yes.
And
4.
Epilepsy...
Little girl.
Severe epilepsy is life-threatening.
Yeah.
You can die of not sleeping enough because you've been having too many tremors.
Completely debilitating.
It's a death of a sort already. Right, exactly. But it could be fatal.
And a poor little kid, too. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, like the most vulnerable people, in your own personal anti-marijuana bias gets in the way of you doing any research on the subject, looking into it at all, looking at the safety levels of this stuff, the efficacy of it all. No.
Is it just crazy Alberta folk? No. It's probably, I really think that the prosecutors themselves have a lot to do with the way that these laws get enforced, don't they? Like, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, don't the police kind of, I wonder at some point they look at what's going to go through the courts and what's not in making decisions. All these court cases are getting thrown out for pot. The cops stop going after people in a lot of ways, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, but some cops are pro, some cops are anti, some cops are silent, and same with teachers, same with every profession you care to imagine. I see us all as in a stadium, naturally, in a stadium as big as the Coliseum, the biggest Coliseum or gathering places we have. And we're all gathered together, and in a natural decision-making process, one that wasn't, filled with kings and hierarchy, you'd have people who devote their lives to each subject, getting time to speak and share their insights. And the ones that the crowd is really popular with get extra time to speak and extra time to share. And then the crowd generally makes decisions as a group, be it 51% majority or some more sophisticated ways of doing it. They make decisions as a group. And our society prevents us from doing that, creates a whole bunch of pretend things instead of that, and gets us busy arguing about not the real issues. And so we have an arena of sorts, but it's spread out all over the whole of society, and everyone has a voice. And because democracy is spread out rather than gathered in one place, because we're not allowed to gather together and share ideas, political ideas together in large groups, unless it's super controlled, we have to see the arena as on the street, between 2 people, between 5 people, between 10 people, and just you have to be the representative of the sanity of the medical autonomy, of the inclusive economy, of the vision of drug peace that we all share. And you have to be the person to stand up and say, I think that pot's a tool, and if you use it properly, it'll help you. And even vulnerable people, if they use it properly, it'll help you. And we got to see coffee beans and pot and all of the things like that. There's lots of ways to
stand up. See, the thing is, for me, though, I start to wonder, and this is what I was trying to get at before, is who is it that's actually making these decisions? Like, when we're talking about the Crown in a court case, or we're talking about, the province or whoever it is that is going after these people on a provincial level.
To quote,
who are these people? Is this the ultimate? Like, does Stephen Harper sit there and write out a whole bunch of mandates that he wants the courts to? Like, I just don't understand who the prosecutors are answering to.
This is my gut feeling about how decisions are made in Canada. Let's say it's like, to quote Run the Jewels, the man behind the man behind the man behind the throne. Okay, the man behind the man behind the man behind the throne is the guy who can afford to write billion-dollar campaign contribution checks. Now, there's a few of those in the U.S. Canada, it's multi-million-dollar campaign contribution checks. Those guys are, tens of millions. It's a smaller ballpark. Yeah. But if you can sign those checks, you get a lot more consideration than Joe Voter does.
Well, that's for sure.
And so those guys are calling the shots when it comes to the establishment. But then there's public opinion. That's outside all of that establishment edifice. Public opinion is what we managed to come up with despite our rulers.
Right.
And
that's a kind of a hazy
keeps
thing.
Going. I know, but
glob of.
But they keep track of it, and use the word legalization, decrim, and continue prohibition or increase penalties. Those 4 categories, and you look at that over time. There's a steady increase in the chunk that's legalized and the chunk that's decrim, and there's a steady decrease in the chunk that's like, stiffer penalties, stiffer penalties. You can see that tracking. Mm-hmm. So public opinion is actually the only thing that keeps this from being an Orwellian drug nightmare. The Scanner Darkly place. That's the only thing.
Some would argue that we are
in that
both.
Already.
Yeah.
But no, we got the Amsterdam, we got the Oaksterdam, we got the Youngsterdam, we got all the drug peace oases. We shouldn't give those up without a fight. We even have the ideal, which is the farmers market. The best of our model of what we could come up with. The most inclusive model in the world. And that exists twice a year. And even if they sent 100 times the amount of cops that they sent last time, you can't stop an idea whose time has come. And I think everyone knows it too. So that's gonna, like, the farmers market will live, and if it's like the same with the rest of the pot economy. If you push down, it pops up somewhere else.
I think it's okay to say that the city seems to be indicating to some of our fellow activists that we're going to be allowed to use the art gallery this year for 420 without any city interruption. We have to jump through the hoops probably and go the permit process and all that, or at least apply for a permit. But I don't think it's going to be hard for us to get.
We've already jumped through all the reason hoops, reason-based hoops. If they're going to foist unreason-based hoops on us, like paying for policing costs, look, I'll tell you what, we'll cover those costs, but we get to choose the cops. The cops is Bert, me, and Carly. We'll be the cops for the whole rally. Yeah. We'll wear a uniform. We'll put on a funny cop hat and a funny cop nose, and we'll police the rally. We'll call you if we need you, but we haven't had to call you in 20 years. So we'll police it.
Agreed.
So we don't want to pay for any of the policing costs, because right now the only policing costs that really involve sweat on the part of the police over the last 20 years is busting our ass for bullshit reasons. So no, we don't like how the police money has been spent so far. We're not paying for any of it.
Assless cop uniforms.
Assless cop uniforms. Well, there's a limit. I'll do anything to legalize pot, but there is a limit to, my opening gesture of police mockery. We'll save that for the closing gesture.
Yeah,
that's our secret weapon.
Finale.
Don't anybody tell the man our secret weapon.
So we were talking earlier about schizophrenia and marijuana, and about how there would be some indicators because so many more people use marijuana and it's increasing all the time. But schizophrenia seems to be pretty steady. Is that what the indications are?
Everything I've looked at in all the countries I've looked at, including McLeod, etc., all 2004, which looked at Sweden and Britain, and then the U.S. and Canadian stats, and I imagine it's the same other ways, is what we call schizophrenia, or those mental disorders, have stayed at about 1% of the population. If you have a broad definition of mental disorder, it could be 2%. But if you have a ridiculous definition of mental disorder, it could be as high a number as you like. But most of the academics say 1 to 2%. Most say 1. And that's what McLeod said. And so that's the facts. And if you look at the cannabis use rates, on the other hand, in 1950, 1% of the population smoked pot. And in a country of Canada's size, back in 1950, that would have been a handful of people.
They were all on amphetamines.
Everyone was doing all sorts of bennies, and there was, in the 50s, there was wartime drugs that they give you during wartime, and a lot of it was
Quaaludes,
alcohol.
when did they come around?
Quaaludes is 70s, I think, for ludes. But they had all sorts of stimulants and all sorts of relaxants. And pharmaceutical or botanical or otherwise. And tobacco and alcohol were hot and cold running water with no regulation, minimal regulations. So you didn't even have health as a thought in the process of procuring, selling any of this advertising. Not in a discussion. Health wasn't a factor. It was just an effect. But to tie it all up together, in wise hands, poison is medicine. In foolish hands, medicine is poison. Ponder that quote and smoke an epiphanic, and get back to me, because when you get that one, you realize there's no good or bad drugs. There's only good or bad relationships with drugs, and then we can approach this thing maturely and say even our teens can understand drugs are tools. They're not. Your teens are not a moth, and drugs are not a flame. Drugs are like coffee beans. If you know how to use a cup of coffee properly, it won't harm you. But if you drink 3 cups a day and then quit all of a sudden, you'll understand the withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
Yeah, you can't just quit a heavy caffeine use intake cold turkey without adverse effects. Headaches that even cannabis doesn't provide when you quit cannabis cold turkey. So these are the things people need to know, courses of intellectual self-defense, so that you can stand up straight, puff tough, keep your heads held high, and say, I'm using cannabis because it lengthens my life. I live longer with less stress and fewer wrinkles, and I don't feel like smacking my teachers or my dad. And I feel, I just feel relaxed, hungry, happy, inspired, and focused. And shouldn't everyone want to feel that way or try to feel that way if they can feel that way? I operate well on it. I'm a high-functioning individual. I don't have many moral lapses, and they're very easily survivable by the rest of humanity. Just leave me alone and let me smoke my weed. And if everyone could say that to all their oppressors, we'd run out of oppressors because they can't handle the reason. It's the crushing grip of reason that just got them by the short and curlies, man. The short and the curlies.
I like that you emphasize the short and the curlies.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm really high right now.
Somebody who agrees with you about that exact point, I think, is Dr. Lester Grinspoon.
Yes, we're buddies on that point.
Yeah. And I want to play this clip because I really like this one. It's just a little, I'm not sure where it comes from, but I've stumbled upon it on YouTube. I'll try and source it. I honestly don't know where. It's just a great clip of Dr. Grinspoon talking on some documentary.
Okay.
So I wanted to share it with the folks at home. So check this out. And this is about the topic of schizophrenia and how marijuana affects people and kids and everything. So it's
agrees with critics who say marijuana may trigger the disease.
I think that is absurd. If you just take the fact that schizophrenia, the frequency of schizophrenia is about 1% the world around. Now, you would expect with a drug that's used as often as it is, you would expect that there'd be a little leap in this. It doesn't change a bit. It hasn't changed. In fact, you can find as much literature about how cannabis is useful to schizophrenic patients as it's harmful.
Dr. Grinspoon could not find evidence to back up the government and media reports that marijuana use leads to drug-induced violence and incurable insanity.
He is hopelessly and incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted.
This substance, the most harmful thing about it was not any inherent psychopharmacological property of the drug, but rather the way we as a society were treating the people who use this drug.
It's been a medicine for about 3,000 years now. It only hasn't been a medicine in this country for 68 years. I say in the scheme of things, it's been a medicine a whole lot longer than it hasn't been.
Dr. Donald Abrams is a professor of clinical medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, and an oncology physician at San Francisco General Hospital. He says doctors were able to freely prescribe cannabis for various ailments up until 1937.
Harry Anslinger, who was a prohibitionist and the first head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau, decided to introduce the so-called Marijuana Tax Act. Physicians in the United States knew the medicine as cannabis, and by using marijuana, he sort of did an end run around the medical community.
The act imposed a high tax on medical marijuana and such onerous registration and reporting requirements that it effectively banned its use as a medicine altogether. The American Medical Association came out in opposition to the act, with Dr. William C. Woodward testifying there was no evidence the medical use of cannabis was causing addiction, and that there are evident potentialities in the drug that should not be shut off by adverse legislation. He opined that it's impossible to foresee how much the new regulations will deprive the public of the benefits of a drug that, on further research, may prove to be of substantial value. The Marijuana Tax Act delivered the final blow to a medicine that was already being replaced by the opiates and aspirin. Cannabis was removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia in 1942. The fact that cannabis was an accepted, valuable medicine in the United States for nearly a century might be surprising to the teens who grew up watching the dramatizations of reefer madness. It certainly came as a surprise to Dr. Grinspoon.
I discovered when I got into the library that I, despite my training in science and medicine, had been brainwashed.
He put his findings into an 80-page paper, aptly titled Marijuana Reconsidered. It was later published in Scientific American. Then his professional investigation of cannabis took an unexpected, personal turn. His son Danny, suffering from childhood leukemia, had begun chemotherapy.
The chemotherapeutics that he had to receive were just devastating to him in terms of the nausea and vomiting. It's a nausea that goes right down to your toenails. I mean, it's really beyond description.
Even with all his prior research, Dr. Grinspoon still had no idea that marijuana might be able to stop Danny's chemotherapy-induced nausea. One night at a dinner party, an oncology doctor who had read his paper on marijuana related the story of a 17-year-old with leukemia who used marijuana to treat his terrible nausea.
On the way home from there in the car, my wife, Betsy, asked me, don't you think we ought to get a little bit of marijuana for Danny the next time he gets? And I said, I'm almost ashamed to say this. I said, no, that would be breaking the law, and I don't want to offend the physicians, who are taking care of him. So I was against it. She's a rather plucky woman, and next time he came in for his chemotherapy, she went up to the Wellesley High School parking lot, and they found his friend Mark, and asked him if Mrs. Grinspoon wanted a little bit of marijuana.
When Dr. Grinspoon showed up for Danny's chemo treatment, he was surprised to find his wife and Danny so relaxed.
They were joking, and he was smiling, and no problem. He got on the gurney, had the injection, and whereas before, with this particular chemo, he became nauseous, felt awful right away, and the race to get home before he started to vomit, and then in a bed with a bucket at his side there until it was just dry heaves. That day, he got off the gurney and he said, "Hey, Mom, there's a sub sandwich on Brookline Avenue, I noticed. Could we get a sub on the way home?"
When he discovered Danny had smoked marijuana, Dr. Grinspoon was not angry. He was relieved.
And I called the doctor, the attending who was taking care of him, and I said, I'm not going to stand in his way doing this again. He said, don't. And don't have him do it in the parking lot. I want to see this myself. And so it went. He never had any difficulty with nausea and vomiting with the further treatments for as long as he lived. He was free of that anxiety. And I can tell you, it was not only a relief for him, it was a relief for his parents and his siblings. It was a godsend.
Not surprisingly, Dr. Grinspoon has become an ardent supporter of legalizing marijuana for medical use.
People who suffer from these symptoms and syndromes, depending on just how serious they are, that's always accompanied by anxiety. And to take and artificially impose another level of anxiety, the anxiety involved in doing something which is illegal, for which you can be punished, is cruel.
By the 1980s, scientific interest in cannabis had begun to catch up with the personal experiences. According to a 1982 United States Institute of Medicine report, Marijuana and Health, the preliminary research coupled with anecdotal evidence warranted a closer look at medicinal cannabis. The report also found that marijuana attacks diseases and symptoms differently than other drugs. This offered the tantalizing possibility for drug companies to develop new, novel drugs out of the chemicals in the marijuana plant. The Institute of Medicine called for more research on these chemicals, known as cannabinoids. Even with this encouragement, research on cannabis failed to flower.
There aren't many scientists or clinical investigators who are particularly interested in doing research in medical marijuana because it's such a hassle.
Marijuana's Schedule I status means Dr. Abrams has to get approval from more than a half dozen regulatory bodies before he can start a cannabis medical trial.
There are so many roadblocks that you have to go through.
Marijuana is an illegal substance that I think a lot of investigators and even organizations just don't want to get involved in something that is so controversial.
Dr. Igor Grant is a professor of psychiatry and the director of the California-based Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research. He says not only is the research bureaucratically difficult, it's expensive, and financial backers are hard to find.
You know, an ordinary investigator just does not have the time or resources to do this kind of work. I mean, you really need, either federal or state funding or pharma funding, something to navigate this whole system.
The center's research was funded by a $9 million grant from California taxpayers. The money allowed for a few legitimate small marijuana trials, including several done by Dr. Abrams, that confirmed what Rosenfeld was saying all along, that cannabis works on pain, especially pain that does not respond to opiates.
All of them, to some extent or another, demonstrated that smoked marijuana is effective in this situation for which we really don't have very good treatments.
I can say that the cannabinoids are almost certain to be useful in neuropathic pain based on the research that we've done.
But even when researchers get significant results like this, Dr. Abrams says cannabis research can still be an academic dead end.
When I submit it for publication, I have found what I perceive to be a publication bias, that people are not particularly interested in publishing data suggesting that marijuana might have some benefits. All of those things, I think, sort of dampen anybody's enthusiasm to take on medical marijuana research.
And scientists are not getting much help from pharmaceutical companies either.
No pharmaceutical company is interested in supporting, marijuana research.
This is a naturally occurring substance out in the world, so you can't patent it per se. So the research on it is quite dicey. It really is. Nobody can make any money on that research or on that development.
Even if drug companies created a novel marijuana plant drug that they could patent, doctors could not prescribe it.
It's going to be a class 1 type of drug. It's not going to be broadly used. And again, why do you want to spend a lot of time developing a drug that you can't really sell?
Why would a pharmaceutical company want to get involved with something like that? I think until, marijuana is rescheduled, large-scale research will probably not occur.
Advocates have been mired in a decades-long legal fight with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency to do just that. In the late 80s, they made the argument that marijuana has accepted medical value and that it belongs on Schedule II.
It was almost passed. Francis Young, I believe, was the DEA administrative judge who, my understanding was, basically suggested that it be made a Schedule II.
According to government documents, the DEA's administrative law judge, Francis Young, found there was incontrovertible evidence that cannabis was an effective medical treatment for nausea and appetite loss, multiple sclerosis, and spinal cord injury spasms. Judge Young ruled marijuana should be moved to Schedule II, writing, "The evidence in this record clearly shows that marijuana has been accepted as capable of relieving the distress of great numbers of very ill people. It would be unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious for DEA to continue to stand between those sufferers and the benefits of this substance." For those who were concerned about marijuana's side effects, Young ruled that as a medicine under a doctor's supervision, marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. The DEA and other federal agencies disagreed. They overruled Judge Young's decision and kept marijuana on Schedule I. But the ruling did add to growing pressure on the U.S. government to go beyond its own compassionate use program and make marijuana legally available as a medicine. The answer? Provide a pill that can do what the plant does. For years, the government had been sponsoring and funding research to put the active ingredient in marijuana, THC, into a capsule form. Known as dronabinol or Marinol, the drug is a synthetic version of THC created in the laboratory. Since it did not come directly from the plant, the DEA placed it on Schedule II.
They wanted to have an answer to people like me. There is a medicine out there that people can buy. They don't have to use herbal marijuana.
Dr. Grinspoon says the problem is Marinol does not work as well as marijuana.
You take people who have used both herbal marijuana, smoked it or ingested it, and Marinol or dronabinol. Every time, never an exception. Oh, I much prefer herbal marijuana.
It was my experience when AIDS patients first started taking dronabinol back in 1992 that they didn't like it. The absorption when taken orally of THC is very variable and low.
The gut only absorbs 12%, plus or minus a few percent depending on the individual. The problem with taking it through the gut, you have to wait for an hour and a half to 2 hours to know whether you're getting relief from the pain or the nausea or whatever it is you're trying to relieve.
How does Marinol compare in all this? I was talking earlier. I mean, do you feel like it's as effective as the plant or no?
No. I do not believe Marinol is as effective as marijuana or THC.
And why do you say that?
I've never really seen it work. We've added on, it's expensive, and I've never had a patient seem to get much benefit from it.
We really haven't had very much success with patients with Marinol for any side effect management. So there's something that is lost in with the THC in that processing.
Dr. Abrams says what's lost in the processing are all the other cannabinoids in the plant, some of which are known to mitigate the high associated with THC, making the patient feel more relaxed instead of anxious.
There are 400 other compounds in the plant, including 70 other sort of lookalikes to delta-9 THC. And those are all there for a reason. They provide balance, if you will, the yin and the yang. And, my opinion that you lose that balance when you remove the single most psychoactive component from the plant and use that as a pharmaceutical.
I've used Marinol on some patients selectively. I've not had any problem with Marinol.
Dr. Voth says while he's not overly impressed with Marinol, he would rather have patients take a pill. He says telling a patient to smoke an illegal plant is substandard medicine.
I treat a lot of sick patients with all sorts of different pain and neuropathic disorders and cancer, etc. And I cannot think of one circumstance in 27 years of active practice that I've had to say, well, it's time for you to smoke dope. I just haven't. And that includes terminal patients and hospice patients.
Anyone who says that, we have adequate treatments for all of the conditions for which marijuana is purported to have some effect, I don't think that is a correct statement. I think the fact is that we have a lot of difficult to treat conditions, and there may be a niche or a place for the cannabinoids with some of those conditions.
Oncology social worker Wendy Gwenner agrees. She's personally seen patients who don't get adequate relief from the anti-nausea drugs. And when it comes to getting patients to eat,
it is far and away the best medication that we have for chronic wasting and for increasing appetite in cancer patients.
There's probably nothing that works as well for appetite stimulation that we have as marijuana.
But Dr. Hensoldt says cannabis does have one side effect that certain patients don't like, namely the high.
Most of the side effects I worry about with patients are really the euphoria and the altered sense of consciousness that people get, and whether they'll tolerate that or not.
Generally, you'd consider a high as an adverse effect. So that adverse side effect for people who don't want to be high is really a problem.
For other patients, though, the high could be part of the therapeutic effect. A 1999 U.S. Institute of Medicine report on marijuana found the drug's anti-anxiety and sedative effects could be a benefit.
I can't convince myself that the psychoactive part doesn't play a part. If they feel good, that's terrific.
But does feeling good lead to addiction?
Absolutely. Marijuana is habituating, addictive, whatever you want to call it.
Dr. Voth says marijuana has about the same addictive potential as alcohol. The 1999 government report found marijuana was slightly less addictive than alcohol, with 9% of all users experiencing addiction. And marijuana does not have the extreme physical withdrawal symptoms that alcohol and other drugs do.
Potential for withdrawal is really minimal because the cannabinoids are stored in fat, so that if you stop using marijuana abruptly, it still leaches out from fat over a number of days, so you don't get a precipitous withdrawal.
We are back on.
Well, as I was just saying to you, if you define addiction as something that is attractive to you, then yeah, marijuana is pretty attractive when it comes to addictions, and so is alcohol. But if you define addiction as possibly dying from stopping using it, then marijuana and alcohol are actually on opposite ends. They're extremes on the spectrum of addiction. Marijuana being the least addictive of all the popular drugs, alcohol being the most addictive of all popular drugs. More addictive than heroin, more addictive than tobacco, the other two biggies. Because you don't die of tobacco withdrawal and you don't die of heroin withdrawal, but you can die of alcohol withdrawal. Alcohol and barbiturates. That's the most addictive thing in the world, those depressants.
Yeah, so those numbers are kind of a little ridiculous.
Those numbers is it all depends on the definition of addiction, and addiction can be used so many different ways. If you look at the history of the word addiction, and you can look this up in a book called Ceremonial Chemistry by Thomas Saz, the history of addiction, the word addiction, is it used to be not a bad word, never used in a pejorative sense. Addiction was like an attraction to cards or games or politics. You were attracted to something, and that was your addiction.
It was like an affliction?
It was like, hey, it was a magnetism. You were drawn to it. It was your attraction.
Right, okay.
So
it had more of a positive.
It had more of a positive sound to it. And then when the drug war started,
propaganda used to
they needed to word that they could unleash upon people to take their own autonomy away from them. They were the moths to the flame of the black candle that, what's her name? One of the famous five, Emily Murphy. Anyway, so the moths to the flame, well, the addiction was that your agency, your decision-making process being taken from you by the drug. That's the whole mythology, is you're out of control.
Yes.
So that's where the term addiction started to sound bad. But I use it in the positive sense too. I'm addicted to chocolate, masturbation, hot springs, really good movies,
Breathing.
sci-fi, breathing, really tasty. The pears that I live with a pear tree. I'm addicted to those pears. It was,
water. I'm addicted to
I'm
water.
addicted to water. I'm addicted to good company and justice and freedom. I'm addicted to all these things. Well, pathological addiction is when it interferes with your life goals.
So
Cannabis
some
use
of those,
doesn't.
like for you, masturbation.
When the scarring happens, then it interferes with some of my life goals. When it's hard to walk, then masturbation is a bad thing. But if you moderate your use, titrate your jerkin dose, titrate your FAP dose, kids. Don't masturbate yourself into a lost skin situation. I'm just talking from experience, man. I don't want you to be suffering the way I did. Ow! Ow!
Yeah, this is an episode for the kids after all. So.
Well, this is about pot and teens. So how can you talk about pot and teens without talking about masturbation? And that's another thing that they used to say was unhealthy. Right. They used to say, first it led to it was the devil's dance or something like that. And then later on it was like, it causes you blind, hairy palms that you can't see with. And all these old wives' tales, supposedly bad for you. And then later on, finally they admitted, okay, it's good for you.
That's why you're so hairy.
Start doses. I don't know, maybe. Yeah, it all started around the same time. I'll ponder that.
Werewolf.
Aroo!
You look actually quite done up. Your hair is cut.
Look,
you look all.
I'm trying to fit in. I'm trying
buzzed up the side.
Trying to pretend I'm like
very nice,
like the Sleepwalkers. I'm wearing a respectable shirt. I don't even have cutoffs. These are actual shorts that came from the store as shorts, and I'm wearing 2 shoes of the same color. What more do you want from me, society? I'm wearing pants, all right? That's really all you should hope for.
Oh, yeah, that's probably suitable.
Yeah.
So that was a good video, actually, I think, of Grinspoon. He's always pretty good to hear, and I like that he's got a personal, touching story, but he's also a doctor, and as we were saying on the break, his credibility is pretty untouched, impeccable.
We've co-written stuff together, so he's not a snooty academic either, even though he's at that very tip top of academia.
Cannabis Culture.
He teaches doctors at Harvard. You can't get much more tip top of the ivory tower than him, but he'll write stuff with me for High Times, and we have. So and he's written stuff for Cannabis Culture that's really cutting edge stuff too. So he's open and inclusive and open to working with all sorts of people, and I love him. I love him to death, and he's one of the most ethical people in the movement. Along with like Riel Kapler and a handful of others. They fight the monopolists and fight for the inclusive economy and the inclusive legalization model. So my hat's off to you, ethical pot activists.
His shorts on and his hat's off.
Well, I'm all for a victimless crime spree, and I might defend other victimless criminals once.
Victimless crime spree.
Once I am off duty from the pot thing after we win. When we win the inclusive economy, when we get no grower, dealer, and smoker left behind, then all the pot activists will metamorphosize into a whole new kind of activist. They will make all the rest of the world not suck as much too. Can't wait for that day. Can't wait to see what Dana turns into, or Chris, or you, or me, or Mark, or Jody, or Neil over here.
Yes, Neil.
We'll all turn into something else, and it'll be just as
A
fabulous.
butterfly?
No, just like, Hillary worked on water for a while. I worked on Burnaby Mountain, anti-pipeline stuff. So we'll turn into other kinds of activists that'll be more effective because we won the pot thing. We'll have those laurels to help us.
Go fight the Spanish Civil War.
We'll parking meters for Neil. We'll
Parking meters for Neil. That's a good one.
Whether it's pipelines or parking meters, we'll be
Gorilla parking meter. Takes it to a militant level.
We will right other wrongs in society. So let's get to that drug peace dividend and let's spend it on cultural evolution. Shall we? Let's, like Bill Hicks, said, let's evolve into angels and explore the universe together forever. If we learn how to share the world. Go Bill Hicks, man, and go Team Awesome, Team Humanity.
Hey, you found the disc you were telling me about, the comedy, or you found?
Oh yeah. Okay, so I was smoking my Epiphenix and walking into the used video store, looking for the cool shit that gets overlooked by some of the kids these days, and I flipped through it and I found a Comedy Central homegrown mixed bag DVD album, and they were throwing all sorts of crazy stuff there. Sarah Silverman. There was comedy, HBO specials, and there was pot-friendly shows that Comedy Central was showing. And then they had this stuff from the 70s, and I pressed play, and all of a sudden it was like a whole bunch of pot activists put together a really simple, easy-to-understand explanation of cannabis with a good budget back in the 70s. I was like, I can't believe this thing exists.
In comedy form.
Well, no, it was more like a documentary.
Oh.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Oh.
But Comedy Central saw fit to, they probably were smoking pot at Comedy Central and said, hey, look at this video. I got it from my brother or mother or something, and popped it in, and they all got super buzzed by it. And they said, well, let's throw that one on the DVD too, even though there's nothing funny about it. Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is it exists at all.
Let's get it up online.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to load it up soon. And Jeremiah also has an article that's just this close to being published now about the dispensary cop. And anybody who has anything to do with the cannabis dispensary is going to want to read this article because we found out what the dispensary cop wants and what he's coming for.
Oh, and what is it that you've added to the article now?
Oh, yeah. Well, we are creating words as we speak. Words that we can use to attack and defend our flower people, the pot community, the relaxed, hungry, happy, inspired, focused, hairy, mellow, horny people of the world. And we come up with two words. The first word was epiphanic.
Epiphanic.
Yeah, it's like a euphoric. A euphoric is a drug that, produces euphoria. Yeah. Right? That's a euphoric. Well, an epiphanic, that's a drug that
produces an epiphany.
Produces an epiphany. If you don't know what an epiphany is, kids, Google it, and it's a PH, not an F. But, an epiphany is like a solution to a problem that you didn't realize you had until, bam, it struck you.
It's a light bulb over your head.
A light bulb over your head. A really, really good idea. Something that's going to help you on your quest to check off shit off your bucket list. So an epiphany is like a really amazing idea and a drug that helps you get those amazing ideas. Like for me, Hug Power, I got an epiphany. Amsterdam Coover was my epiphany that got turned into even a better epiphany called Vansterdam. These are things that marijuana helped me. And marijuana helped John Lennon do the backward masking and the fucking with time on his songs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So marijuana is really good for lateral thinking and doing things in a new way.
And so you had an epiphany.
And I had an epiphany that we should use a word to describe this, like euphoric. Exactly. That cannabis we should add that to the lists of the things cannabis does when we rifle off that list and we need a new term for it. Because it does help with epiphanies, and everyone needs epiphanies so we can evolve into sustainable Homo sapien sustainabilists instead of Homo sapien beat each other up us and steal all our stuff us. You know what I'm saying? Are you getting me? Are you getting the heart to heart here, humans out there? I'm really high.
Nice, David.
Yeah.
That was good. That was really awesome.
Yeah, this is a human
it's a
moment.
Great interview today.
Yeah, you're getting the real DML here.
And I was reminded by Booth in the chat when he said Bill Hicks for president that you mentioned Bill Hicks, and you were mentioning your video that you found. I found a disc of all Bill Hicks comedy, of like all of his craziest comedy. All like it's like 4 or 5 discs, and yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Have you seen?
I like Bill Hicks.
The marijuana movie from the 70s called Aphrodisiac?
I have not.
It is a hardcore porn / marijuana documentary that...
Hardcore? Wait, a documentary about hardcore porn?
No.
Or it is hardcore porn and a documentary?
It is hardcore porn and a documentary.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it was done in the 70s. I think the year I was born, 71 or something like that. And it's quite incredible. You can Google it. I think it may be online somewhere.
Wait, you're not a product of something in this movie, are you? And that's why you came out the way.
I have a marijuana. There is a marijuana story
Your mom and dad are in the video?
tied to my mother and dad before I was born, but it wasn't that one. But anyway,
created a creature. Oh, Neil's got parking issues already. Wait, you got to be on the show though, Neil?
Okay, here I'll get off and I'll let Neil on.
Well, he's got to go do his parking now, though. Oh, you still have 30 minutes? Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, well, I'll get off.
Okay.
Oh, but before I get off,
Mm-hmm.
Can you play me some Little Dicky?
Oh, he wants to see Little
I
Dicky.
want to hear Little Dicky. I want
Dicky.
Little Dicky in my head. I want to.
Okay.
I want to like.
We'll play you Little Dicky.
I want to roll out
with
Little Dicky.
The audience may appreciate Little Dicky.
If you whip out the Little Dicky, they'll go nuts.
So wait, you have to guide me to the video. Which is the one you want to see?
White Crime.
Okay.
By Little Dicky. There's some pot in it. There's some other white crimes in it too. White Crime.
Here it is. Official Vivo video.
Official Vivo video.
He's big time these
this
days,
may be
is he?
NSFW.
He's all big time.
Not safe for twerk. NSFT.
Okay. Here's Lil Dicky. This one's for David.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. And this is about teens and pot and Little Dicky.
Little Dicky's time has come.
That's hilarious.
I think the slew of puns that was just flying there.
Oh man,
was funnier than the video itself.
It's pretty good, yeah. Hey, Pot TV.
Hi, Neil Magnuson. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Wearing the Cannabis Day shirt.
Yeah.
So we have a triumphant return to the Vancouver Art Gallery approaching for
Nice.
420, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's true. I hope there's no battle or anything, and it should be good.
Well,
Neil,
hopefully the regulations or what they want for their permit is not going to be restrictive in any way.
if the cops try and shut her down, are you going to be on the front lines, Neil?
Yeah, man. Sure, of course.
This time you'll be wearing a 420 shirt, though. Do you have?
And not the same shorts.
We'll get new shirts this time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll be able to do our whole stage production, advertising, and everything. If not, then we're going to have issues. But yeah, we want to use the stages. We need to do everything we were able to do before.
Yep.
So I wanted to have you on to talk about. I actually have another video, a couple of videos to play, but I want to talk to you first, Neil, about this David Bratzer thing that's going on.
Yeah, he's before a tribunal. I guess the last day is tomorrow, because as a member of LEAP, he joined LEAP in 2008. He also is the president of LEAP Canada, but he's had a lot of resistance and discrimination from the upper management of the Victoria Police Department. Jamie Graham really didn't like him saying anything to do with drugs should be legal or anything like that. And I guess there was 11 different incidents that happened over the course of time. And in February of 2013, he filed a grievance with the Human Rights Tribunal, and that's being heard now. So that's what's going on with that. It's really a sad state of affairs when the police in Canada want to maintain drug prohibition, even in the face of understanding that having possession of some drug is not a crime. A crime is intentionally harming somebody else. The whole prohibition of drugs has resulted in huge unintended consequences of harming the poor and the sick in our country and all of this, and yet our police chiefs are still in favor of prohibition, in favor of keeping those police hounding people for what they might have in the way of a substance in their pocket, as opposed to something that they stole or somebody that they've harmed. It's really sad that that's come to this. So let's wish David all the best and hope that the tribunal rules on the right side of this issue, and police do get to speak their mind. There's no free speech for police in our country. They're not allowed to say dick about their opinions, especially while they're on duty. I mean, he was told that he couldn't. His opinions were his and not those of the police department, and that anything he did had to be in his off time, and he's kept up with all of that. But they still sent him a bunch of letters telling him that he had to get permission before he said anything, and that they needed to screen what he was going to say, and constantly reminding him that the chief, Jamie Graham, was not in favor of what he was doing. So I think that's very wrong, and I hope that the tribunal gets it right. I know one of the things that has been brought up in this tribunal is that Jamie Graham himself has had some of his opinions while on duty about how some of our laws are not right, and he thinks there should be more harsh penalties for texting and driving and other things like that. And I know David, who's representing himself in this tribunal, has been bringing those things to the forefront as well.
But the tribunal is because of the complaint that David put in, right?
Yeah, he's the one who filed the complaint because of how he was being treated by the police department in Victoria.
And so he gets to go and give his basically side of the story and explain to them why he has a problem and all that kind of stuff. Is that what it's about?
Yeah, that's what's going on there. And Chief Jamie Graham's his supervisor.
What would the outcome be at the end?
Well, hopefully it's a little more free speech for police officers and an ability to exercise their opinions, especially when they're off duty. But I think it's really important that those people that are charged with the enforcement of these laws have the ability to speak for or against them. You know, they're the ones that are right there in the front lines of this. They're the ones that really understand and have a better insight as to what's going on. For them to be muzzled the way that David has is really wrong. So I'm hoping the tribunal sees that and rules in his favor.
Huh. Well, that's very interesting. We'll have to keep watching that. Now, the thing that you posted was something from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition?
Well, just that hearing is happening. And originally they were appealing for people to come to the court building that's happening in, but there was a follow-up letter that said there's really limited space there and there's not a lot of extra room for people. But that tribunal is going on, and we'll get the outcome of that fairly soon. I'm not sure how long it takes for them to deliberate. Yeah, it's in Victoria. That's not happening yet for sure.
When is this happening? What's the actual date?
It's happening today, and it's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day, and yesterday as well. Yeah, it's in progress right now. He filed it, I think it was October 2013, and it's just being heard now. So.
Wow, I'm looking forward to finding out what happens. Yeah, David is a great advocate, police officer who, he's
president
really
of LEAP in Canada. And,
yeah, exactly.
LEAP is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Yeah. There's like 80,000 members worldwide of all different levels and facets of law enforcement that have joined in this chorus of saying that the drug war is an absolute abject failure, and we should not be continuing to criminalize people, especially our young people, for things that are not actually a crime. It undermines our entire justice system. It brings all of our laws into disrepute when we're trying to pursue this particular law in the face of all the evidence now. There was no debate when they brought these laws in 1923 in Canada. It was simply based on hysteria brought about by Emily Murphy in her articles in Maclean magazine. And even for the next couple of decades, there was no incidence of cannabis arrests even in Canada. Not until the 60s, when the hippies brought cannabis back from Vietnam and settled here a lot in Gastown and that kind of stuff. We didn't have problems with marijuana in this country when those laws were brought in. It was really a solution looking for a problem, is how it was described back in the day. And here we are all these years later, all these arrests later, all this money that we've wasted later, all these ruined lives later, and finally we're trying to get this thing turned around. But it's so entrenched. There's so many groups, including the police, that have made a lot of money on prohibition, and it's caused a lot of their employment and a lot of their tools and toys that they get, and they don't want to let it go. The pharmaceutical companies are investing a lot of money to keep prohibition of cannabis happening, because that's going to really interfere with their bottom line and selling their synthetics. So there are still these groups that have been making a lot of money on this model of prohibition that we've been having go on for so long, that really don't want to let it go, and that's why we're still fighting it the way we are.
Exactly, and no matter how much Colorado, at the end of the show I'm going to play a video about the billion-dollar industry happening in Colorado and down in the U.S. because of the new legalization. But even despite all that, there are very powerful groups who don't want legalization, like in Colorado, to happen everywhere because the police and other institutions that have been profiting for so long will not be profiting anymore off this.
In fact, one of the ways that David Bratzer was muzzled was he wasn't allowed to comment on what was happening in Washington and Colorado.
Wow.
Crazy, eh?
Wow, why shouldn't he be allowed to comment on that? It's insane.
Don't try to make sense of this stuff, Jeremiah. Prohibition is a logic-free zone. It does not make sense.
I think cops
it only
should be
makes sense
allowed-
if you look at where it's making money and who's making the money, and then you go, oh, I see why they're continuing this. It's not because marijuana is hurting people or the scourge of marijuana addiction is costing our society huge money. None of that is true. As David pointed out in his segment earlier, there's no victims that are ever trotted into these courtrooms. There's no victim impact statements in any of these marijuana convictions or crimes that are being tested in the courts. They don't have any of that because there is none.
Just the people are victims when the government tries to take it away from them.
Yeah.
That's when they suffer. And actually, I have a video here. This is from Vice. This was posted about a year ago. It's a really interesting video. It's not too long. From Vice about kids
video.
and marijuana. You've seen
Stoned
this one before.
Kids, yeah.
Stoned Kids, it's called.
Yeah.
The titles. It's Brave Michaela. She's amazing. And some information. I think it's on this topic. It's one of the better videos out there that shows some cool stuff about it. So
I remember being in a weed store on Kingsway when there was a VPD officer in the store, and Joe, the manager there, put this video on the big screen for that cop to watch. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, this one, it's hard to argue with this stuff. When you see people like Sanjay Gupta and these other doctors, and they're saying this, I mean, I have a hard time myself wondering how other doctors don't, come along when they see these videos and when they see this. I know it's anecdotal evidence, but still, when there's so much anecdotal evidence, when it shows time and again that this stuff's working, isn't that time to really look at this? And
there are more and more doctors really looking into cannabinoids and really understanding the science behind it. That is improving. But you got to understand, doctors are really indoctrinated by pharmaceutical companies. They invest more. The pharmaceutical companies in Canada invest more in the training of doctors than the Canadian government does. So they get their way. They spend 7 years or more indoctrinating these doctors into pharmaceuticals being the answer for every ailment that comes along. And it's really not in their interests to have their clients using herbal medicines or things where they're not getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical companies. It's really sad, but you can't really see doctors these days as being neutral and just people that want to try to help people. They're not at all. They're very biased towards the pharmaceutical companies. That's all the training that they've had. And in reality, they are the frontline dealers for the pharmaceutical companies, and to try to get those dealers to recommend you use some product that isn't in their book of what they're trying to sell. I mean, that you're cutting their grass is how it goes, right? And they don't like that. So it's really hard for doctors to come on the other side of this. A lot of pressure from the college, a lot of pressure from their pharmaceutical investors. So yeah, that's kind of why. But I think that's going to change in the near future too. As this momentum continues, people are going to want to get on the right side of this issue as history starts to unfold here.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's watch this video, and then we'll come back. And if you're are you going to be around? So you might have to go do your parking.
How long is the video?
The video is just over 10 minutes, I think. Oh, yeah, it's about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Well, I'm going to go put some more money in the meter so I can come back and tell you a little bit about what's going on with the trial for Cannabis Day.
I want to talk to you about that
and that
too.
kind of stuff as
Okay.
well. So, cool.
Okay, awesome, Neil. We'll see you in a sec.
Let's listen to Michaela.
Again, I just wanted to tell you how my cannabis makes me feel. It makes me feel tired, like rest time tired. It makes me have the munchies.
That's an easy day to remember. Friday the 13th, 2012 was the day we got told she had a mass in her chest. Her oncologist came and said the chemotherapy wasn't doing what it was supposed to. They were going to recommend us to start considering full body radiation and a bone marrow transplant. We knew that wasn't necessary. We knew that what we were going to do would be right. So that day we gave her her first dose of cannabis oil. 6 days later, it was in full remission.
Medical marijuana is legal in 20 states and DC, but there are still legal use cases that are very controversial, like medical marijuana for kids. Some claim it's a wonder drug for epilepsy, severe autism, and to quell the harsh side effects of chemotherapy. Others decry the long-term effects of pumping weed into still-growing bodies. We headed to the small town of Pendleton, Oregon, a state where medical marijuana is legal, to visit Michaela Comstock, an 8-year-old who takes massive doses of concentrated THC to treat her leukemia. Her family believes in cannabis's curative effect, that pot can literally shrink tumors.
I like lemon.
You like just eating?
Sour. Hey, that's the dishwasher.
I can put bread in the dish. I'm gonna put this croissant in the dishwasher.
No, you can't do that.
Okay, fine. Where should it go then?
That should make it all soggy.
Michaela is about to take the THC equivalent of 1/3 of an ounce of the highest grade medical marijuana, roughly 10 bong hits. She does this twice a day.
This is bubblegum, and this is orange. And then I give them to Daddy.
A lot of people complain about it when they get too high.
Too high?
The psychoactivity of it is very extreme compared to just smoking a joint. 1 pound will yield between 45 to 80 grams, depending on your process.
And how often do you take these?
Every day.
And how do they make you feel?
Energized and happy.
So I take this, and I'll fill up one side of the capsule.
And sometimes I keep it in my mouth for a little bit so I can taste the flavor. Because then it tastes yummy.
In the conversation around medical marijuana for children, dosing is a major issue. How much is too much? Michaela's treatment is about delivering the most amount of THC that she can tolerate, psychoactive properties and all.
This is like the medicine basket. Saturation is key in treating cancer. You have receptors on every cell and organ in your body. The more cannabinoids you can intake, the more effective the treatment would be. And it protects the nerves from the damage caused by the chemotherapy. Cocoa butter lotion. It's a cannabis-infused essential oil blend that rolls right on.
So it's just like a tiger balm, but...
Yeah, you drop it right on your tongue.
Yeah.
Every now and again, Michaela likes to have medibles or infused goodies or candies. And she'll eat these things on top of her oil. That's when she gets the more noticeable psychoactive effect. Michaela loves to eat these. You feel your dose kicking in?
In the absence of any formalized production, the THC oil that Michaela takes is made at Stony Girl Farms in a DIY garage operation.
There are a lot of people who, including the federal government, who don't feel that children should have cannabis. But we feel that it's more important to save the child's life than be concerned about the child having THC in their system.
Can you guys take us through the process of making the oil?
Absolutely. This is our processing area. The trimmings from all of this process, as you see is going into here, is actually what we're going to be making the oil out of. So we'll start by taking this and we'll put it into our food processor and we'll just quickly grind it up. Fire hazard is a very big problem with this. Make sure to do this outside. Don't do it in your kitchen. We're going to put 1 pound of material in this pot, and then we're going to add to that 2 half gallons of 190 proof alcohol.
So it's a really intense color, huh?
It's a very, very intense color. In fact, there's many, many colors in that. When we start to pour it out, you'll see that there's lots of reds and purples and blues in it as well.
It's really quite colorful.
Watch the color of this as I pour it. It should be a real reddish color. Now we're going to take this mixture of alcohol and oil and we're going to go ahead and pour it right directly into our Fry Daddy. Look at all those red colors in the center of that. What we're going to do is evaporate these alcohol fumes. We don't want to meet the fire department. Guess what? That time is now. We don't want any alcohol around left for the patients. As you can see, it's quite thick. So if you touch it to your tongue, it's still a drop.
Does this drop get me high?
It very well can.
Okay. In addition to cannabis, Michaela takes traditional cancer meds too. How do you think the cannabis helps her? Like what?
Well, the cannabis is made it so Michaela really has minimal symptoms. She was very, very, very ill and in a lot of pain. She didn't want to eat and very thin looking. The very first dose of cannabis we gave her, she instantly said she was hungry and she smiled and she was happy. We get our baby back. She plays now and she's a child again.
As much as Michaela's folks prize the palliative effects of cannabis, it's the drug's supposed curative power that makes them such zealous advocates. In conversations with Brandon, he often uses the word apoptosis. How exactly does THC allegedly shrink tumors? THC attaches to cannabinoid receptors in our bodies and translocates bad mitochondria in cancer cells to produce RNA that disintegrates the walls of the endoplasmic reticulum. Peer-reviewed medical studies have backed up this claim, but only to a degree.
There is no control when it comes to this word called cancer. The only thing we did have control over was saying no to radiation therapy and yes to giving her cannabis. It won't work for every single person. So every single person's different, and it doesn't just take cannabis.
Come to my house at 1.
Michaela's become something of a celebrity in the weed world, inspiring other parents to give their sick kids cannabis, including their babies.
Abel's first medicine that was introduced to him when we started treating him, cannabis oil infused into organic agave nectar.
Hey, mister. Hey.
He had stage 3 Wilms tumor. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to play. He just kind of laid around all day.
Then you introduced the cannabis.
Yeah, and that day he made like a huge turn. He started eating and playing, and it was completely different.
He was screaming, running around the house, barefooted, like just a normal kid.
At this point, we should mention that the medical community at large doesn't think that pot can cure cancer, and furthermore that giving weed to kids presents more risk than therapeutic reward. Michaela's oncologist refused to comment on this story and never gave her a prescription for medical marijuana. The dispensary in Portland wrote the prescription, which is perfectly legal. Brandon has a dispensary card that allows him to be the delivering agent of medical marijuana. The way things work in Oregon is that each patient that is prescribed marijuana, even a child, is allowed a caregiver, and a grower to grow 6 plants. Brandon is Abel and Michaela's caregiver. When Michaela first began her cannabis treatment, she moved into Frankie's home clinic. We visited his garage grow room and found another layer in the community of believers in the healing power of weed. You can kind of consider it like an alternative medicine hospital of sorts.
Well,
like you have inpatients, do you say?
Well, we have had a couple, yes. Doesn't necessarily work for everybody. Sometimes we get people too late, and different cancers, different diseases respond differently, and they won't let us do much science on it. So at this point in time, it is really if you're pardon the pun, a grassroots movement, We moved here from the state of Alabama to grow medical cannabis. I had a dream of cannabis curing cancer and many diseases. I woke up in the middle of the night, Googled, found a movie called Run From the Cure. I found the information to be compelling. I ran in and woke my wife up and probably sounded and looked like some kind of maniac and told her that cannabis cured cancer. And we started researching, and we researched literally for months because it just sounds so preposterous. The condition against this plant, it's been so thorough for so long that to say that cannabis has any medicinal benefits, much less the ability to heal disease, sounds to people like you have totally gone off your rocker.
I guess it took some researching to convince me that, that there was a possibility that it did cure cancer, which was very profound.
And then Michaela came along. Witnessing Michaela go through what she went through and seeing how well she did only further convinced us. Take a look at what other kids look like who are going through similar treatments. I think the evidence is overwhelming.
She's the healthiest child on chemotherapy.
Yeah. She's a bundle of energy every day, all day long.
It's not because of the chemotherapy.
I do think it will be proven. we're not legal federally. We're just going to continue to try to do what we feel is the right thing and hope that the federal government will allow us to do so.
All right, so we're going to read If a Peacock Finds a Pot Leaf. The 4 Rasta pigs, they were known as medical marijuana patients, but Peter didn't actually know why they needed it. So he decided to stop by and ask. He knocked on the door. "Who's there, man?" one of the pigs called from behind the door. "Hello, I'm Peter the Peacock from next door." They quickly opened the door and snatched Peter in. It's a good Rasta hat. "He's got a bong." "What can we do for you, man?" the 4 Rasta pigs said in unison. "Well, actually, I was just wondering why you need medical marijuana." The 4 Rasta pigs took turns telling Peter of how they'd been losing sleep ever since the wolf moved in down the street. Uh-oh. Eventually, they went to a doctor and found out they had insomnia. Their doctor recommended medical marijuana because it was natural and wouldn't harm their bodies, but it would help them sleep. Peter gets his medical marijuana license, tries it, and finally he feels so much better. With a smile on his face, he fans out his colorful wings, and he is happy again, thanks to medical marijuana. Yeah, that's good stuff. Kevin Sabet is the director of the Institute on Drug Policy at the University of Florida and a former Obama administration drug policy advisor.
This is Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, it's Krishna from Vice. So what is your general position then towards medical marijuana?
Well, my position is that marijuana definitely has medical value, but we don't need to smoke, vaporize, or eat it to get that value. Medical marijuana, as it currently stands, is a joke. It's a joke. We don't smoke opium to get the effects of morphine. It needs to be separated just like 100 years ago when we separated opium from its recreational and medicinal properties. It's something that we definitely need to pursue, frankly, with more vigor than we've pursued in the past.
Why do you think that hasn't happened yet on the federal level?
Because it should be lab scientists, pharmacists, and doctors in certified laboratories as opposed to guys mixing a mixture in their backyard and growing something in their basement. Don't use it as a cover for legalization and make it truly legitimately medicine.
But for Michaela's family, weed is already a legitimate course of treatment. And then this is your dream journal?
The Big, Big Dream by Michaela Lynn Comstock.
So what is this dream about?
A big, humongous ice cream. Lime, chocolate, and strawberry bubble gum. I had a dream about a bunch of banana syrup all over ice cream. That's Rocky Road. That's rainbow sherbet, and that's orange sherbet. A bunch of ladybugs are crawling all over me.
Oh no, what did that feel like?
Ticklish.
It was ticklish?
Blueberry, root beer, and bubble gum. Big day. We're all getting ready for something.
Do you know what that something was?
That's a bunch of food plates.
Oh.
Now the big tree.
Now the big tree.
The big tree. It snapped and broke and fell all the way into the river. It went down the hill. It went down the hill. It went down the hill. Roll, 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 roll. Into the river. Splash.
I've got a bit of the giggles. So it's my fault. It's hard to imagine what it's like to have your kid diagnosed with cancer, but it's clear that Michaela and her folks are empowered by what they believe to be marijuana's positive effects. They, like other proponents we met, have donned the robes of the converted with evangelical zeal. Whether weed might in fact be the cancer drug of the future remains to be seen.
Okay, Neil. That was a good video.
Certainly was.
Vice. They do good stuff. I like that Vice.
So horrible that we have to fight our government for the ability to just use what medication we want for ourselves, eh?
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Those that fought and were willing to give up their lives for our freedom are probably just rolling around in their graves right now, thinking, what the hell was that all about?
Yeah, it's brutal.
Upside down crazy world.
Did you get your parking figured out, Neil?
Yeah, more upside down craziness, eh?
I'll move this out of the way. So, the court case. Can you fill us in on the latest? Have they given you anything?
Nope.
Last time we talked with you, you had gone to the latest court session. They really didn't have full disclosure.
Nope.
They didn't give you the videos. They didn't give you all the police reported material and everything.
They verified my phone number and said that they would get that to me, but I still haven't heard a thing from them. Because they don't have it, eh? I mean, they have the film that was taken, I'm sure. But they don't have a certificate of analysis for anything to do with cannabis. There was none involved in that whole event. So we'll see.
Do they need that, though? They have you on video saying that you're going to sell marijuana, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's a crime.
Being on video saying it,
yeah,
you're right.
I don't think that's a real crime.
It's not a crime. But if they also have police reports saying that they witnessed you doing that.
Oh, man. You know, it's a violation. It's a clear violation of our rights as free people, to act against us with our dollars and our police resources when there's no victim, nobody's being harmed. And in fact, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum is what was going on there. That's a day when we purposely break those laws out of moral obligation because those laws are wrong. So, I mean, this is not, dealing drugs to prey on innocent drug-addicted people and take huge amounts of dollars and use it to buy fancy cars and gold chains with. I mean, this is an activist. This was a day where activists come and gather and protest bad laws, and no one is ever harmed, and that's the point, and that's why we do it. We throw out pounds and pounds of weed to whoever happens to be in front of the stage because nobody's getting hurt, and we know that, and we're confident in that. If we thought there was a young person that was going to be harmed because they got a hold of one of those joints of cannabis in some way, man, I'd certainly never be part of that. I'm a parent, I'm a community volunteer, I'm a good human being, and I'd never be part of that. But I am so confident that these laws are so wrong and that no one is going to be harmed by getting a joint of cannabis. That's why I partake in these rallies. And for them to come in and use that kind of force and treat us like criminals, my goodness, this is upside down, backwards, inside out world that we're living in. And I hope that this is another move forward in addressing that and in stopping that. Freedom is so important. People who died for our freedoms, we need to respect that.
So nothing yet from anybody in the government.
No.
Do you think that what's gonna happen, Neil? Do you think they'll drop it?
I've always believed they're going to drop it before it gets there. I could be wrong. Who knows? I said I was going to try to get legal aid last time, and the judge conferred with the prosecutor, who confirmed that there's no jail time on the table for me, so therefore I don't get to have legal aid, which is also wrong because I probably need legal aid to help me prevent me from having what little bit of money I have taken away from me. I guess.
The judge commanded you to get a lawyer.
Told me to make sure when I come back I have a lawyer. I mean, she's going to be a bit unhappy probably because I think when I go back on the 3rd I still won't have a lawyer. The lawyer that I've been talking to, he's out of town until the 7th. And I'm not so sure I want to go that route anyway because he's telling me he wants money. And I don't have money. I don't feel like appealing for funds. I'm going to have to talk to a few of the wiser people in our community and see what the right thing to do is. If the right thing to do is to pay this fellow to represent me and then raise some funds to do that, I do want to do the right thing for sure in these proceedings. But at this point, I'm going to go and represent myself. I think I like to have lawyers giving me advice. I'm not.
Well, I don't think you'd be too bad at it, Neil. You know your stuff, so.
Well, I don't know if I know my stuff. I just actually had Mr. Tusaw join in on a thread that was happening between Dana and myself and some other people talking about the dispensaries using the Marijuana Party office defense. And Kirk did school me a little bit on my obvious lack of understanding of common law and statutory law and stuff like that. And I'm certainly no expert at all. I believe I have a good handle on what a human being has as a natural right not to be bullied by even a tyrant or a dictator, let alone a public servant. How much weight that's going to carry in the courts, I'm not sure. We'll see when I get there. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot between now and then. I'm going to spend some time at the law library, get some advice from those people as well.
What did Kirk say about the Marijuana Party defense?
He doesn't feel it's a valid defense. I think it's yet to be challenged in the courts. I know that there was 3 days ago 19 dispensaries that are going to go with the Marijuana Party office defense or strategy. We'll see when enforcement happens and whether that goes before the courts or not, how that actually plays itself out. There's not a lot of enforcement going on now. We've got 100 dispensaries. Today they announced
what was Kirk's reasoning for not thinking that it was something that was a viable solution?
He doesn't think that illegal activities are protected within the office of a federal party any more than it would be anywhere else. But
that was my criticism. You can't commit murder either.
No, but murder wouldn't be something that common law would protect. And I think that the activities of a political party under common law are protected if they fall within the principles of fundamental justice. That is my understanding of it. I think that the Marijuana Party of Canada has as the fundamental beliefs of our party is that cannabis should be legal for people to trade amongst themselves, to use for themselves, and all of those things. And I believe that my understanding of it is that political parties, along the same lines as societies in Canada, exist so that people who are oppressed by the current laws and feeling like they're not having their beliefs protected have those vehicles to protect their beliefs with. In the case of societies, they can form those societies and engage in their beliefs within those societies. And in the form of political parties, it's even more protection than that, because as a political party, you're trying to further your beliefs through the political process of actually forming government and affecting change in that way. And so for our beliefs that we're being oppressed by these laws are that we should be able to trade in and use cannabis and fundraise for our party with that belief system. Yet to be taken to the courts. We'll see what happens there. I know lawyers don't like it. I haven't had lawyers give me any favorable views on that. But I've also been told that lawyers swear an oath to the bar, that they're not really allowed to engage in the common law side of things. And I may be wrong about that. I know Kirk said in his post, I saw it just before I had to leave and come here, that common law, broadly described, is just the accumulation of judgments in courts over the years. That's what Kirk says it is. I believe him. I think he's a smart guy. I'm not so smart when it comes to law. We'll see.
Yeah, well, he is a lawyer, so I guess he does have some authority on that subject.
I think so, too. Yeah, he's been involved in a lot of constitutional challenges. I know he wants us to be able to further our beliefs and further what we're trying to do here in having cannabis prohibition repealed. And I do trust him. But at the same time, I think he's a little biased. He's trained in that side of things. And, I still think that there's some truth involved in that other side of things, that we're operating a commercial premise under the party headquarters banner, and that certainly we don't have to pay licensing fees to the city for operating our political offices. Whether or not a dispensary can operate within that premise and not pay licensing fees, yet to be determined by the courts.
Interesting. Well, that should be something to find out.
On the dispensary side of things, it was released today, CBC did a story. The city says that there's 176 applications in for dispensaries in Vancouver. There's only 100 or so that are actually open and operating right now. And of those, there was 69 that are applying for cannabis or Compassion Club status. So that kind of blows me away that there's that many applying.
That's a hell of a lot, actually.
Yeah, I don't know how many are going to be approved, but that's a lot.
Here's an article in the Globe and Mail. Almost 200 applications filed for Vancouver pot dispensary license.
Maybe it wasn't the CBC, maybe it was the Globe and Mail, although I think the CBC also has a story up on their website about it too.
Yeah, the city of Vancouver has received nearly 200 applications from illegal medical marijuana dispensaries seeking business licenses, setting off a process that's expected to dramatically reduce the number of such operations while making Vancouver the first jurisdiction in Canada to regulate storefront pot sales. So this is getting
dramatically reduce the number. Well, there's 100 now, and there's 176 that have applied.
Well, but they won't. All of them won't get it because it's going to be a competition narrowing down. So that means the battle is on. Not all of these will stand.
Well, there's the declustering that's going to
There
remove
will only
a
be
few,
100
for sure.
or less standing by the end.
But if there's 100 left standing, that's not reducing drastically the numbers at all. What they've drastically reduced is the amount of services that can be provided by these places, with the banning of the vapor lounges, the dab bars, the mail order, the home delivery, edibles. Man, let's not forget edibles, and the age restrictions and stuff.
The age restriction thing, that's rough.
Yeah, because young people need cannabis too. A lot of them are using it for very valid reasons. If you're not using it for a valid reason, well, I guess you have to be an adult to use things for non-valid reasons, but that, you know,
Valid
according to who is right for sure, you know. I mean, if you can decide you want to ski and you're going to climb up to the top of a snow-covered mountain and strap a couple of slippery things to your feet and head on down the hill.
Yeah, more power to you.
Yeah, you know, if you're an adult and you've decided you want to do that, you know.
But the government likes to be the nanny and likes to stop people from doing those things that don't hurt other people, but even just hurt themselves, possibly. Well, some of them, they allow us to do lots of them, but if it comes to euphoria, then no, you're not allowed to have fun. It's about
only if
getting
the
high or
corporations are
something.
providing the euphoria. You know,
It's a strange thing, isn't it?
Well, it's not so strange, actually. It started out strange for me a while ago, 20 years ago, when I used to look at the world and think, man, this seems so strange. You know, we're supposed to have public servants, and I thought we were free, and I kind of understand what justice is, and I know what a crime is supposed to be, but, you know, none of this makes much sense. But then looking into it over the course of time, it all makes a lot of sense, you know. I mean, the slave masters of the past, which are the financial elite of today, they've been preying on people, monopolizing things and exploiting people for generations and generations. They don't just go away because we decide to have public servants. They try to find new strategies to access us through those public servants. They've had 100 years of practice. They've really co-opted our democracy to protect their interests with these lobbies. Yeah, man, they're lobbying behind closed doors, and that's a fancy name for threats and bribes. And so that's what's going on here is our public servants don't have our best interests in mind. They have the best interests of the corporations that successfully lobby them. They want their products to be the ones that we consume. And so it does make sense when you look at it like that. But
I can't question the motivation of our public servants necessarily. I can just see what the outcome is. So for whatever reason, whatever it is that they, even if they think they are helping, in some ways they're hurting. So,
well, if you're talking prohibitionists now, there's other things at play there. The corporations want to have their drugs protected and monopolize the purchasing of those.
I want to have
but
my drugs protected.
They need to find people that'll further that agenda for them. And how they do that is by looking for people who really are self-righteous zealots who believe in what they're doing. The prohibitionists have an agenda of wiping out drug abuse, of stomping out drugs that cause drug abuse. They're well-intentioned in many cases. They do believe in what they're doing. They've had bad experiences or experiences that lead them to where they are. Many of the prohibitionists have been directly affected by drug abuse or drug gangs, and they really want to stamp out drug abuse and drug gangs, and they think that by furthering prohibition they can do that. But the problem is that, of course, you can't do that. That prohibition increases the demand. It guarantees an unregulated underground market that's very dangerous. The more you try to enforce your way out of it, the more dangerous it becomes. The amount of money that's involved is huge. These gangs that form to protect their interests in supplying drugs, they're so much more funded than our public servants, than our police departments are. I mean, they've got as much money as small countries in many cases. They're not going to be deterred by any type of sentence. You know, it can't happen. It's not. We're not going to win this. It's failed so horribly.
And that's not. I mean, this is like a steamroller now, anyways, because this dispensaries with having 100 of them in town, them being allowed to stay in some way, this is going to be exported to other places. Here in the city of Vancouver, they can't really enforce the laws, even if they want to shut all of them down. It's going to take a lot of work to do that. People will just keep reopening and popping back up again. So I think it's kind of like out of the bag now. And when you look at what's happening in Colorado, where they're making all this money from it, it's time. It's time for this to be over. And I think it's just like so evident to everyone that
the
it can't
police
go on.
even, they're done with this too. In all the times that people are caught with cannabis in British Columbia, it's only 6 or 7% of those encounters that result in any kind of charges. Because the police know. And when you look at the police that are actually charging people, it's just a few of them that have that kind of an agenda. Those self-righteous zealots that think that they're going to protect some young person from going on to being addicted to heroin because they're going to charge them with having weed in their car.
Yeah.
And, that's what's going on. But if you were caught by a policeman having just robbed somebody, I mean, it's not 6 or 7% of the time that you're going to get a charge out of that. It's every single time that a cop encounters somebody that's actually committed a crime that they're going to follow through with charges. So it's already severely undermined the laws and the respect for laws, even by the police.
The officers have the discretion themselves to either bust you or not. It's kind of like it gives them this authority and power over the people. The cops themselves make the decisions, not based on the law.
No.
So it's, that's why they have drug laws in the first place, so they can go after whoever the fuck they want, whenever
the poor
they want.
and the colored.
Yeah, especially minorities or whoever they don't
No,
like.
you're so right. The time is past due now. We've passed the tipping point a long time ago. It's how we work this all out now. Now we know that the fight is more about who's going to monopolize the sale of cannabis. Are we going to leave any of the growers, dealers, and users behind? And that's our fight, is to make sure that none of them get left behind. That now we need to protect all those people who've been growing our cannabis for us and who've been, willing to risk their
like
livelihoods.
Even in the city of Vancouver, the marijuana issue becomes a criminal record issue. So, if you have a criminal record, you can't have a dispensary. So how, the people who are the most equipped to actually go into this business, who have the history, who know what they're doing, who have the connections, have all this stuff, they're the ones who are being excluded from the process completely, or at least having to be, there's ways of subverting these things, and that's what everybody's doing anyways. You get your mom to do it or whatever, right? So
always ways around all
your
of this stuff,
pet goldfish to run the dispensary.
I know that some of the people that applied for licenses, for example, for dispensaries, they don't have a location yet that they could legitimately use.
It's their house.
They just put down an address that they had control over, knowing that it wouldn't be acceptable, knowing that they're going to get 6 months to find a proper location if they can.
Carly Marley's in the house.
Hey, Carly.
Hi, Carly Marley.
We decided earlier that if the city wants to impose policing costs on us for the rally for 420, that we're going to reject that, and we're going to make you and Bert and David cops, and you guys can police our event for us. Yeah. Much better idea.
There was a question here from, who is that, Semi Windup? Windup? I don't know what that is. But I wonder if that's 176 applications, because each applicant can apparently apply for 5. No.
I think that's each individual one. Yeah.
When you apply for one, you only apply for one and you get 5.
You're allowed to have 5.
You can't, you just apply once and they'll give you 5 eventually.
Yeah.
Like if you do get accepted, that's when you're allowed to have 5.
Yeah.
And then you can open as many as you want, as long as they're within those boundaries.
Wow, wouldn't that be something if we end up with 500 dispensaries because the city did this?
Well, no, but still, they've only
the
plotted out.
declustering won't allow for that.
The declustering, exactly. They've really put a lot of effort into figuring out, that 300-meter limit is for a reason.
I think the city said that within the limits that they've imposed, there's room for about 100 dispensaries.
Yeah, I think 80 to 100.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. People will squeeze them in everywhere, I'm sure, find some way around it.
And are there going to be those that just stay open and don't apply? And what's going to happen with that? Very interesting times ahead.
I sure hope so. I hope that none of them close. I hope not one dispensary has to close. That would be terrible.
Yep.
No, and then, if any of them do, that's hurting patients. So that goes against exactly the spirit of what the city of Vancouver is trying to do. So.
If any dispensaries want to defy this regulatory scheme and stay open, we'll be there to defend them. If the city tries to close them down, we'll have activists there. We'll have signs there. We'll talk to the media and try to defend the patients for whatever dispensary that is, that they're arbitrarily going to close. Just because they didn't apply, now, so far there's been, 11 different raids on dispensaries over the last few years, all for a variety of different reasons, but each one was a reason. That either they had plants in their store, or somebody was reselling to youth, or some person without a membership card bought something there.
The latest being Lime Life, and they were raided because they were organized crime related and selling to kids, they said?
Yeah, they said, the reason that they raided them, they were investigating them for organized crime, but during that investigation, they witnessed somebody purchase without actually having a valid card. And that was the reason for the raid. They also said that they were selling to youth, but there's been no such charge. And Lime Life, they reviewed their video. The employee did actually sell something to someone without carding them. It was a very busy time of the day, apparently, and they fired that employee. So
it seems like the VPD has this default method of claiming this person was selling to youth, this person was selling to children.
They've got a squad, eh? They've got that same squad.
These guys.
And they're doing undercover.
Where's the evidence of this? Where's
stuff?
the evidence you were selling to youth? That's the same thing they say to the newspapers.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, in a way, that's defamation.
Oh, it is. And that's all they're doing,
libelous.
Too. Yeah, it is.
They really are claiming you're selling to kids, and there's no evidence, and they haven't presented any. Isn't that wrong? Shouldn't there be some rule that the cops can't do that?
I'd like to see the youth that they're talking about. Are these kids on bicycles with their baseball caps on sideways that are obviously kids, or are they 17, 18, 19-year-olds that are obviously adults, that are going to smoke weed if they decide they're going to smoke weed? Doesn't matter what their parents say to them anymore because they've risen above that. Yeah. In our society, by the time a person is 16 years of age, if a parent hasn't got it figured out, hasn't properly instilled values in that person, it's a bit too late. By 16,
well, it's never too. I don't think it's ever too late, but.
Well, but that's the shot that parents have, I think, is up to about the age of 16, because they tune you right out.
Well,
by that
I think the whole concept is flawed, because I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with a kid being able, that's 16 or 17 years old, being able to decide for himself.
That's what the Senate said too.
Yeah.
Is that 16 should be the age of acquisition
16,
for cannabis.
I agree with that.
And it makes sense because it's on that far end of the scale of harms where it doesn't really harm anybody.
18 is too old. We
really
should be 16-year-olds should be able to drink as well. And in fact, I don't even believe these laws, like forcing people to do this, makes sense anyways. Like, look at Europe, where they don't have these youth laws for things like liquor, and there aren't problems.
Yeah.
It's not like a bunch of people are
drinking.
They
have alcoholics.
They have alcohol problems,
There's
of course.
some alcohol
but
abuse,
it's not,
for sure.
It doesn't cause more problems than the alcohol abuse in the United States.
But you don't find that the young people there turn the drinking age and then become binge drinkers on the weekends and cause all kinds of problems both for themselves and society. We're really a messed up. We got really messed up regulations about alcohol here and how we treat that.
Well,
people don't all of a sudden turn 19 years of age and then they're a different person than they were the day before that. And the whole transition from child to adult should be governed by parents and society in a gradual form. I mean, people under 19 should be allowed to drink. They certainly shouldn't be criminalized for drinking, because giving somebody a criminal record, I mean, that's probably more harmful than the alcohol is going to be for them.
But
parents get to.
But if you go to the liquor, if a kid gets liquor from the liquor store and somebody sells liquor to a kid, they don't shut the liquor store down.
Take all their supplies and.
No. That's absolutely
like that.
ludicrous. And especially if there's no proof that it happened, could they go in and shut a liquor store down just by saying, oh, well, we think they were selling to kids, but we don't have any evidence of it?
Well, you talk about schizophrenia. I'll tell you, we're a schizophrenic society when it comes to the hypocrisy of how we treat alcohol compared with how we treat cannabis. My God. It's time we sort this out.
It is. Like in Colorado, where this is $1 billion industry.
Crime is down.
Gigantic.
It's not just money they're making off of cannabis sales. Their crime rate is down. Their impaired driving rates are down. Their suicide rates are down. All kinds of good stats are coming out of there now, as we knew it would. We knew it would.
Another Vice documentary. This one's called Inside America's Billion-Dollar Weed Business. This is going to be the final video of the day. It's already after 6, so we got to wrap this up.
All right, I just comment on what we just said there. You know, Harper says, why would we add one more illegal drug or one more drug to the mix that we have right now? The answer to that, Mr. Harper, is because this drug would offset the use of a lot of those other harmful drugs that are used in harmful ways. And that's why we should include another one on the table of what's available to people to reduce the harm of the other ones that are on the table. It really is a harmful thing to say that cannabis is not on the table and all these other ones are.
No, it just doesn't make sense. It's a total hypocrisy. When on any block, I always say this, you can walk down the street and on one side you have a liquor store selling you enough liquor in one bottle to kill you. On the other side of the road you have like a drugstore where there's endless things. You can even buy rat poison there.
And tobacco.
Yeah, and a kid could go in and buy rat poison, swallow it and die.
Yeah.
You could go buy a bottle of Tylenol, swallow the whole thing and die.
Kids can buy gasoline. 12-year-olds can be sent to the gasoline station.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense. So
just makes money for people.
It just goes to show you the real reasons. It's obvious that these people in charge know these things, and that's not why it's illegal. It's not illegal because it might hurt you. It's illegal because it might help you.
And it might hurt the bottom line of some of those people that helped your politicians get into power. Yeah. Are you ending the show on this?
Yeah, we're going to end the show on this.
Well,
Neil,
thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and we'll be back again next Friday. As usual, you can watch all kinds of Pot TV shows on pot.tv. Don't forget about Redbeard tomorrow, starting at 4 p.m. There's Opus on Mondays, and Carly Marley now co-host with Opus every Monday 4. Nice. And Wednesdays from Under the Seed Desk, Marijuana Man and Friends, 4 p.m. Vapor Central is getting renovated right now, so there's no Vapor Central shows up on Pod TV right now, but they'll be back in action soon with a brand new establishment all looking pretty in there. And, we love you, Pod TV. We'll see you soon.
Peace, pot, and freedom.
This video is Inside America's Billion-Dollar Weed Business. Vice, these guys make amazing video documentaries all over the place. Check them out, of course, at vice.com and all their other sites they got going. These guys are cool. Actually, we've met a few of these guys coming around making documentaries about what goes on here in the building, and they're all pretty awesome guys.
They're doing great work.
Yeah, it's good to check this stuff out. So Peace Pod TV, watch the video, and we'll see you soon.
Institutions are regulated at the federal level. Most businesses in the industry are operating without a bank account.
Typically, we tried to have 2 banks, one we're with and one we're going to when they shut us down. It's just another fire drill that you kind of learn to go through in this industry.
If you're investing in a business that's dealing solely in cash, it's difficult to get that comfort level.
In a city with dispensaries as common as coffee shops, Denver is undoubtedly the epicenter of America's legal marijuana movement. And if you're in the business of bud, it's a good place to be. Colorado accounted for a third of the country's $2.7 billion marijuana market last year. But with being America's fastest growing industry comes growing pains. Marijuana is still illegal on the federal level, which has led to conflicting state laws, restricted regulations, and endless problems for cash-only marijuana business owners and operators. However, market projections of over $11 billion in the next 5 years still have everyone coming to town for the green rush.
We're outside the Cannabis Cup in Denver. It's 420 today. It's basically like Christmas for anyone who smokes marijuana.
The Cannabis Cup looks like a giant pot party, but with legalization, this bleary-eyed consumer base represents a huge financial opportunity unlike any before. High Times, the sponsors of the Cup and loud advocates for a legal market, have seen this coming for a long time.
I just think there's no other holiday like it. It's not a religious holiday. It's not a historical date like D-Day or December 7th. It is a holiday that the stoner community made an international holiday. I can't think of another holiday like that. Everybody says, this is the day we celebrate cannabis.
After 40 years of cannabis commentary, High Times has stepped off the sidelines with a multi-million-dollar growth fund to invest directly in marijuana-related businesses.
These are the guys from Elemental Seeds, Tony and Jason. I discovered these guys, Dan Sky did, all right, in Montana. They're a couple farmers, wheat and alfalfa farmers in Montana. These guys are master growers.
Would you want to go back to farming alfalfa, or are you set with marijuana like that? Cannabis is it?
I think cannabis is it, there's no medicinal benefits in alfalfa.
But even the most eager marijuana fans are aware of the difficult market conditions.
The Colorado industry, I say, has been incredibly patient with this bureaucracy. They have new rules thrown at them monthly, and it drives them crazy, and yet they continue to keep at it and continue to flourish. So it's dealing with lawmakers, dealing with policy, trying to make this a level playing field for this industry. That's what the hurdle is.
With so much money to be made, 420 isn't just for stoners anymore. Meeting the political and legal challenges of this emerging market is a new kind of marijuana enthusiast who's getting into the game for a different kind of green.
We just checked into the Marijuana Investor Summit, which has a completely different feel than the Cannabis Cup, and we're just going to see the big players that are investing in this market today.
The summit joins the growing list of conferences around the country dedicated to networking and investing in cannabis. But most importantly, entrepreneurs are here to learn how to become successful from the few who got here first.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to introduce the pot barons of Colorado.
Okay, I'm Andy Williams, and I am CEO of Medicine Man here in Colorado and Medicine Man Technologies, a consulting company. If I were getting into this industry right now, I wouldn't do it in Colorado. And I'm not saying that to try and keep people out of Colorado to compete with my stores right now, but there's going to be a thinning of the market right now. It's pretty saturated in Colorado, and there's a lot more growth coming online. So this is going to be a very difficult place to begin. You have to have big money in the game just to get a license, and then also to be able to produce and to compete immediately. You don't have the slow growth opportunity that we had here, so you better be well organized, well funded, and have a great team of professionals behind you.
A clear example of the shifting attitudes towards legal marijuana can be seen in the demand for industry experts to navigate new money to success. Aside from the marijuana plant itself, consulting was one of the most profitable sectors of the industry last year. Trent Wolovec is the COO for American Cannabis Company, a consulting team that gives advice to businesses in the legal space and helps connect them with investors.
Yeah, it's cool to see the natural evolution of kind of what's been progressing over the last 6, 8, 12, 18 months for the space, and it kind of all culminates here at this event for sure.
One of Trent's most successful clients is Andy Williams of Medicine Man. So we went to their largest operation, where he both grows and sells marijuana.
So this is the Green Mile.
It's very green.
It's very green. So these are some of our mother plants. This is what we use to create new plants. And so when we look for genetics, we look for good, big, and fast. Those three things. And when we find it, we grow a big plant, and then we clone it, and we'll plant it. And it will be an exact genetic duplicate of this plant. It's going to stand. Let me make a little more room here.
This is so exciting.
Go back in there a little bit.
This is what it's like to be a marijuana plant?
That's right. Now all this green is reflecting from you.
Even with an approved state license, large-scale marijuana producers are under the microscope for every aspect of their operations. Meant to weed out any semblance of the black market, the constantly changing regulations have put many companies out of business.
This is a RFID tag, or radio frequency identification tag, actually gets attached to the plant.
Oh, so you can track it from when you sell it to where it came from?
That's right. It's totally traceable. The state knows exactly how many plants we have in our system. They know when they're harvested, how much was harvested. They know everything about it. It's a manufacturing facility. We manufacture marijuana.
The success of Medicine Man is due in large part to its family-run business model.
We put a business plan together, and we went to my mom and somehow sold her on the idea. She didn't even know my brother was growing in his house. Didn't even know he smoked pot.
Surprise.
It was really funny. But somehow she believed in us and gave us our seed money, and we've done pretty well.
But for most businesses, access to capital is still severely restricted by state policies, as well as by the stigma surrounding the marijuana industry. Colorado has approved a credit union for marijuana businesses, but the future Bank of Bud will not be able to take deposits or make loans without federal approval. Fighting to change both market policies and impressions is Taylor West.
There is no industry without the advocacy that creates it. But when you're talking about one that is currently federally illegal, it is that much more important that you have people advocating for the industry's position with lawmakers on a daily basis.
Taylor West of the National Cannabis Industry Association is an advocate for common sense reform to the current marijuana laws at the federal level.
What is the biggest issue when it comes to banking and cannabis businesses?
So because financial institutions are regulated at the federal level and marijuana at the federal level is still considered an illegal product, A lot of financial institutions, most of them, are extremely hesitant to work with any business that is at all related to the cannabis industry. We are in an economy that assumes that as a business, if you have a legitimate and thriving business, you'll be able to get some kind of capital from small business loan from a bank. And that isn't the case in this industry. What that has meant in the past is typically that you are raising money from friends and family.
Can you talk me a little bit through experiences that you've had with banking and formal banking services?
We have had an on and off again relationship with banks in that, in this industry, banks liked us as customers, especially early on, but they didn't want to know. It was a don't ask, don't tell relationship. And if they dug deeper, then we wouldn't get an account and we'd try another bank. So typically we tried to have two banks, one we're with and one we're going to when they shut us down. And April 14th, we had, $500,000 in checks written out to the federal government for our taxes and whatnot. And the bank called us up and said, we're shutting your account down effective, pretty much immediately. And so we had these hot checks heading towards the federal government. And so we had to stop payment on the checks, and we really had to scramble to get our taxes into the government that year. It was just another fire drill that you kind of learn to go through in this industry regularly. And we're fortunate enough right now to have a bank, and we'll be happy and be content until we lose this one, and then we'll go from there again.
But for investors who are turned off by these risks in the U.S., an increasingly stable market has emerged to our north, Canada. What is the biggest difference between companies in Canada and in the U.S.?
I think first and foremost with banking, it being federally legal up there, they do have access to your traditional banking.
Is the U.S. missing out in any sort of way compared to the Canadian cannabis market?
Here in the United States, you can't even cross state lines or state borders with product. And so, that really kind of puts each separate market in its own little niche. And so that's really kind of why the Canadian market is advancing a little bit quicker as far as scalability goes.
Since 2001, medical marijuana has been legal in Canada. But 2 years ago, the system shifted away from small local home growers to a federally regulated system with just 25 licensed large-scale marijuana producers in the country. We went to the east coast of Canada to check out one of these commercial operations.
We're headed to Organogram in Moncton, New Brunswick. It's the only licensed medicinal marijuana grow east of Ottawa. We're going to go meet with the president and CEO and go on an investor tour of the facility.
Marijuana is a recreational drug, and it's been for a lot of years. And it was legal up until the 1920s. And it's a medicine now.
Behind me, there's an investor tour going on. We have people from the big banks of Canada and other analysts. They're basically looking at what Organogram is doing and seeing if they want to put their money in it.
There are many people currently that would like to have the prescription. It's still difficult to find a doctor that will prescribe it.
Are you selling all your production right now?
Yes. We still have a waiting list.
So 100% people are waiting to get your product.
Yes. We talk about when we look at our society in North America, there was prohibition. We understand what happened when prohibition ended and the opportunities that were presented in the liquor industry. So I see the industries being similar. I'm not proposing that alcohol is a good thing for society, and I'm not proposing that marijuana is a good thing for society. But the reality is you can't stop them. Obviously, governments are looking at this and saying, well, if we can regulate it, control the usage for our minors, and the almighty dollar in terms of taxation, that, it's going to go there. The shareholders that we have probably a little over 1/3 that are U.S.-based investors. Your U.S. market is very fragmented with the fact that it's illegal at a federal level. A lot of the U.S. investors are seeing what's happening in Canada. It's more of a friendly framework for regulation. And in Canada, we're able to create very large companies. So as a U.S. investor, they're seeing that opportunity of size, and there's tremendous interest from the U.S. investors.
And what is your relationship with the banking systems in Canada?
Started quite rocky. We have 5 large banks in Canada, but we can't borrow money from banks currently. Our bank account was closed about a month after I got here. We received a notice saying that, within 30 days, we appreciate your business, but please take it elsewhere.
Did they tell you why they closed your bank account at first?
No, nothing divulged at all whatsoever. Quite shocking, considering that we are a legal business selling a legal product in Canada.
So even though banks, for example, the big banks in Canada still don't give you loans, you do have accounts and do have credit cards with them.
Absolutely.
Does that make you attractive to foreign investors, that kind of stability?
Yes, because what it does is it takes it out of the cash industry. So if you're an investor, you want to make sure every dollar finds its way into the bank account and back to its shareholders. So, if you're investing in a business that's dealing solely in cash, as an investor, difficult to get that comfort level.
While these companies in Canada are able to have bank accounts and credit cards, most legal marijuana businesses in the U.S. are still cash only, a serious obstacle for the growth of the domestic marijuana market.
What this means is that most businesses in the industry are operating without a bank account, without a checking account. When that happens, you are forced to carry out all of your transactions in cash. You're also dealing entirely in cash on the back end of your business, paying your employees in cash, paying your utility bills, which can run in the tens of thousands of dollars a month if you're a cultivator. Your taxes you have to pay in cash. All of this creates a lot of problems. The most prominent one is safety. If you are a business that is operating entirely in cash, paying your employees in cash, and it's publicly known that you're forced to operate in cash, you're sitting duck for violent crime.
Without regulations that make it possible for marijuana companies to have banks, security has become a booming sector of this industry. Having lots of cash on hand and a product that's not covered by insurance makes dispensaries and grow operations easy targets for break-ins. This amateur break-in of a local dispensary occurred during our week in Colorado. Adding the most complicated layer to legal marijuana's financial problems is a little-known section in federal tax code.
What is 280E and why is it such a big deal for the industry?
Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code is a section that was put in the early 80s after a convicted cocaine dealer wrote off supplies that he used in his cocaine trafficking business on his federal taxes. And the IRS tried to challenge it. It went to court. And the court essentially said, as the tax code currently stands, this is legitimate. The business isn't, but the write-off is. So then this provision was added to the tax code that says, if you are, in their words, trafficking in a controlled substance that is either Schedule I or Schedule II, then you cannot take the normal business expense deductions that any other business is able to take. And because marijuana is still a Schedule I controlled substance in federal law, it is affected by this provision. The way this ends up playing out is that many of these businesses pay anywhere from 60 to 85% of their profit in taxes. And that's just crippling for any business, but especially businesses in what is essentially a startup environment. And that's all money that would get pumped into the local economy, but can't because it's being sucked away to the federal government.
Recently, there's only been one significant attempt for marijuana reform at the federal level. The CARES Act could make it easier for legal marijuana businesses to access banks. But this bill likely won't even make it on the floor, meaning states are still operating in a fractured way when it comes to marijuana laws. If change for the marijuana industry is dependent on Congress to take action, the next generation of pot barons and cannabis products may very well read Made in Canada.